Shaggy squinted against the glare of the sun as they walked down the sidewalk. He would have preferred to keep their little scouting party smaller. But XIV and her crew insisted on hanging around. So Shaggy had his pack spread out and start taking in the neighborhood. Once out and through the deli that sat above their cavern home, Shaggy started walking. He didn't really have a direction in mind. But he mostly wanted to get a sense of the area now that the wild bunch was gone. What he saw as he walked wasn't much of a surprise. The area had always been sort of destitute, and with the stampede, things were slightly worse. Buildings were burned out, while the streets and random bits of public property were broken to hell. It gave the entire neighborhood a more apocalyptic vibe than it had previously. Shaggy groaned as he walked down the sidewalk, his hand up to shade his eyes. "Nice place," XIV quipped sarcastically. "Yeah, well, when a gang of hybrid mutants come stomping through looking to riot. This happens." "What happened to the mutants?" Censor asked, brushing a hand through his beard. Shaggy grunted. "Dave and I handled their boss, but the police were already cracking down on things. There were hundreds of the bastards." Mel snorted. "You and Dave battled 100 NPC gang members?" "No shot." "Well, it wasn't just us. This is Austin. The police were out in force and the HLO sent a token group of soups. But mostly, Dave and I were clawing our way through the crowds. Until we found George." Shaggy pulled at the thin white t-shirt he had borrowed from a lackey. It fit tight against his chest and he wasn't a fan. Neither was he happy with the flip-floppy sandals he had procured from the same lackey. What self-respecting person went around in sandals? He felt like the damn things were going to fly off at any moment. Cutie floated down from the rooftops as they passed another block. The fairy-like woman grimaced as she reported. Shaggy shrugged as he focused on not losing a shoe. "I don't know. I was told that this place isn't exactly high on the HLO protection list. In fact, the cops out here are mostly mundanes. So we should be left alone." XIV turned to regard a crushed blue mailbox lying in the street. "So what's the plan exactly? I mean, with this entire neighborhood. You sound like you want to take it over. But I can't see why. There's nothing here." Shaggy chuckled. "That's exactly why I want to take it over. It's pristine, the civvies aren't going to put up a fight, and now that the wild bunch are gone, we can truly move in. It's going to take a lot of credits and elbow grease, but if we can build this place up, the Legion will have their own base of operations topside." "So you want to be heroes and save the neighborhood?" Censor asked, confused. "Kind of. We are going to ingratiate ourselves with the community. The cops and the supers aren't helping them. So if we come strolling in, say we offer protection and supplies for a small fee, we will look like heroes. Then the community will protect you and you'll be insulated from supers and police." XIV nodded understandingly. "But will the city just let you do that? Don't you have to have permits or something to work on buildings and do construction?" Shaggy held up a hand as he rotated around a stumbling NPC. The obviously drunk man scared as Shaggy danced away. But he went ignored. "Who said anything about doing any rebuilding ourselves? We're just a bunch of concerned citizens who live in the area. We've taken it upon ourselves to protect these people from the more treacherous elements of the city. If somehow construction projects get done and the community profits from that, well, that's got nothing to do with us, right?" Cutie nodded. "Okay, but how are you going to do that? The Legion actually knows a construction company that may help. But before we get that far, we need to sweep the neighborhood. We've got a few lackeys out and about. But we're not collecting scouting reports like we do below ground. How do we get one of those?" Shaggy shrugged. "We'll build it later. But for now, I gotta find my friend." Shaggy trailed off as he saw an odd-looking orange sign. The creature emblazoned on the wooden sign was standing provocatively and blowing a kiss to oncoming patrons. Shaggy grimaced as he read the sign. "Come on down to Nukes and save a buck." XIV read aloud. What the hell kind of creature is that supposed to be? Censor said, pointed a hand at the orange creature on the sign. Shaggy sighed as he started walking closer. She's a hybrid and one of the Legion's friends. Give me a second. Hell no, I'm coming with. XIV said, sticking to Shaggy's side as he approached the fairly large convenience store. Nuke had chosen a magnificent spot for her new store, even if it wasn't doing that much business, by the looks of things. It sat on the far corner of the block and took up the whole side of the corner. It had a large open area where customers could come and go, and Shaggy could even see a few metal shutters hanging, ready to descend at a moment's notice. Shaggy was barely through the door before an angry, squeaky voice was yelling at him. There you are. What the hell? I move out here and your people tell me you can't be reached. I've been suffering by myself in this rotting neighborhood, waiting for you to live up to our bargain. Shaggy rubbed his head as he made his way through the store. Nuke had done a good job of collecting a wide assortment of items. She had clothes and shoes as well as food, and even some toys. Shaggy shimmied his way past a pile of foam footballs as he made his way to where Nuke sat on the counter. The hobgoblin/gnome hybrid had a hand on her hip and her pointed face was in a large scowl that pulled her orange skin tight on her face. Sorry. Pressing issues came up. We had to handle them. Yeah. The entire city knows that a bunch of you guys took out Cog. Didn't take you for the Samaritan type. Shaggy blinked, but he shook it off. Of course, the NPCs had some idea about what went down. I'm not. But Cog had it coming, and I owed him one. But how's tricks? It doesn't look that bad. Crash. Shaggy turned to see Censor and Cutie hurriedly picking up a rack of plastic disc and ancient batteries. He swore under his breath before he turned back to Nuke, a grin plastered on his face. XIV and Mel were giggling over some novelty t-shirts in the corner as Nuke raised an eyebrow at him. They seem older than the last batch you had. Yeah, well, the Legion is growing. These are a bunch of idiots that won't let go of my tail. But never mind them. How many people have you talked to about coming over to our little slice of heaven? Nuke raised an eyebrow at him and crossed her arms. None. What do you mean none? Shaggy rubbed his face. Okay, how much do you need? How much you got? Nuke grinned. Shaggy shook his head and leaned against the counter. The two engaged in a long, drawn-out negotiation that Shaggy was sure wasn't in his favor. The skinflint little hybrid was taking him for a large amount of credits. Not just to entice other merchants to the area, but also to buy her services as a liaison with the group. Shaggy went along with most of it, because he didn't want to deal with all of it. He made sure to tell Nuke that only early adopters got the same 5/95 split she did. Anyone who didn't come in early was going to be cutting the Legion a larger batch of credits. Nuke merely nodded as she greedily ran her clawed hands over the credits Shaggy had given her. After the talk, and after buying some boots, Shaggy asked Nuke about Kexar. Nuke's goblinoid pinched as she got a disgusted look. That opportunist is to the east a few blocks. He's peddling his nonsense on the local wildlife, hoping some gang is going to come out on top. Not a fan of your neighbor? Shaggy asked. Shaggy gave the small hybrid a nod as he turned to leave. As he moved, he spotted XIV and her friends huddled around a few magazine racks. The digital readouts on the rack displayed the names of many magazines. But XIV and her friends seemed to be wrapped up in comic books. Shaggy coughed to get their attention. Ahem. Y'all ready to go, or do I need to buy you candy first? XIV and Mel shot him dirty looks as Cutie chuckled. Censor merely glanced up from his aqua-colored comic book. You done? Yeah, and I know where Kexar is. So let's go. What's a Kexar? XIV asked as she put her comic back on the stand. Their little troop left the store and headed east as Shaggy explained about the alien weapons dealer. XIV and Cutie looked impressed by the story. But Mel was a little more skeptical about the usefulness of a weapons dealer who wasn't loyal to the Legion. He's a necessary evil for now. In fact, him selling to the local gangs is a good thing, 'cause it makes them an actual threat. So when we come in to take them down, we get new weapons, and we look good to the civs. It's a win-win. Until one of us gets cubed by this Calzor's weapons. Mel grumbled. Shaggy rolled his eyes. Oh boo-hoo, you'll have to go to Deathville and you'll miss a few things. If it makes you feel better, you can be the one to fry him once we're done with his services. Happy? Not my issue. Mel said, shaking her head. I just don't think having an unknown element on our turf is a good thing. We should give him the option to bend the knee or move on. He's already bent the knee at least as much as a guy like him will. I put the fear of God into him last time we met. Don't know how he'll act now. But we'll see and take it from there. Sound good? Mel shrugged her shoulders and kicked a piece of trash down the road. You're the boss. Shaggy stared at the blue-haired woman for a few beats. But he decided he wasn't going to ever have a good read on her. She seemed extremely loyal to XIV and followed the woman around like a loyal soldier. But she also questioned everything. Which, when Shaggy thought about it, is probably what you wanted in a second in command. Ephemera spent much of her time giving him shit, too. Censor and Cutie were easier to figure out. The broad-shouldered censor was a player who was just here to have a good time and hang with friends. He didn't really want to rule the gaming world, just have some fun and kick back. Cutie was kind of the same way, except she seemed a bit more flighty in both tone and attitude. XIV was the real go-getter. She wanted to experience everything the game offered and was more than willing to ride someone's coattails to get it. Their group traveled across the barren and broken streets, passing collapsing buildings and burning piles of trash. A few times, Shaggy had to stare down a passing crew of street toughs. But they seemed to register how dangerous Shaggy's crew were, or they just had great survival instincts. It was when Shaggy started spotting weapon bulges on the passing mobs that he figured they were getting close. The passing NPC thugs had eager looks in the eyes. Shaggy could feel his crew tense up as they passed each new mob. The area was full of thugs with new weapons, just looking for an excuse to try them out. Shaggy was about to make an example of a purple alien that was eyeballing him, when XIV pointed to a large space near the center of the block. Is that it? Shaggy blinked as he took in the large spot between two massive apartment buildings. It looked like it used to be a communal parking lot for both buildings. But now it was virtually a marketplace, complete with a rolling entry gate. Various rock aliens and ogres dotted the area as Shaggy and the others approached. Both the rock aliens and ogres were carrying some heavy-duty rifles that Shaggy could not identify. But most everyone seemed cool with the roving guards. All throughout the open area, shopkeepers hawked their wares and patrons zigzagged through the asphalt market. Toward the back, a bigger wooden stage was set up and Shaggy could just make out the alien, Kexar, striding back and forth on the stage. Shaggy felt a shiver go down his spine as they crossed the threshold into the area. Several guards and patrons turned to regard them, but immediately went back to their business, not seeing them as anything interesting. Shaggy kept his ears open as he passed by several vendors, making mental notes about what was being sold in this little marketplace. It sounded like everything from potions to weapons was being passed around. There was even a winged angel-like alien selling poisons of some stripe. Shaggy found it very interesting that Keck was doing a lot of this out in the open. Censor tilted his head toward one building and stopped. Shaggy turned to regard the big man, but Censor shook his head and started walking again. Something interesting? Just a gang planning some nonsense. But not all of them seemed interested. Shaggy looked around at the crowded bazaar. You can make out noises in all of this. Censor nodded. Yeah, I gotta focus, but I can do it. All my senses are enhanced. So not only can I hear them, but I can smell them, and if I knew where they were standing, I could see them too. That had to be hell when the game started. Actually, it was fairly easy to get a handle on. Sure, things were a little overwhelming at first. But once set your base limit for things, you can dial it in as you want. So what made you pick up on the gang, then? Censor shrugged. I'm always keeping an ear out for certain keywords. Attack, kill, things like that. It's like setting a trap. Once something triggers it, I zero my senses on it and listen in. Shaggy nodded slowly as they arrived at Kexar's stage. Well, keep your ears open. My gamer senses are tingling. I'm sure they got a cream for that. Mel smirked. Shaggy rolled his eyes as he moved to the edge of the stage and glanced at the pacing Kexar. The tanned alien man with the swirling eyes. Regarding everything in the market as he walked back and forth. Shaggy thought the slim man seemed nervous as he raised an arm and waved. The arms dealer spotted Shaggy immediately and a smile broke across his face. Shaggy swore mentally, as he did not like the look of Kexar's smile. Neither did XIV. He looks like a cat that's just seen a mouse. Shaggy groaned as he agreed. Be on your toes. Unbidden, Shaggy jumped onto the stage and rushed over to the taller man. Kexar smiled down at Shaggy as he raised a hand to hold off his guards. Shaggy. How good to see you. What can I do for you on this fine day? Save the small talk, Kek. What are you planning? Kexar grimaced as he raised a finger. It's not me that's planning anything. I just got a better offer. From who? Shaggy snapped. Kexar's face sneered as Shaggy heard Censor suck in a breath from the side of the stage. Someone who knows what they are. Kexar was interrupted as Censor shouted. Snipers! Shaggy sprouted his claws and slashed at Kek as he dove forward. A green flash appeared in his peripheral vision and Shaggy felt his right side scream in pain. He and Kexar skidded to the far end of the stage as Shaggy's claws bent around the taller alien's chest. Kek was clearly wearing some kind of armor. You aren't unstoppable, Mutt. It's time you learned that. Kexar shouted in Shaggy's face. Shaggy ignored the alien as the sounds of laser fire and shouting were happening all around him. His right side was wailing in pain as tried to get to his feet. But he was unsteady and instead fell on top of the prone Kexar. The fall made another green laser flash miss Shaggy by a hair and he rolled him and Kek over, putting the taller alien in the way of any more fire. Who got to you? Shaggy shouted over the sounds of fighting. Kexar grinned even as Shaggy's claws climbed up to his face. Oh, you poor stupid dog. This is way above your pay grade. Before Shaggy could ask anything else, there was another flash of green and Kexar grunted. The tan alien had just enough time to look surprised before his skin turned gray and he turned to dust. Shaggy's grip loosened as the man and his clothes were disintegrated right in front of him. Mel's blue lightning streaked across multiple merchant stalls, their metal frames arcing the lighting around like a net. Occasionally, it would slam into a rock alien or ogre. But more often it would smack into an NPC merchant running away. Shaggy winced as he saw a little old lady get blasted off her feet as the lightning hit her in the back. But Shaggy didn't have time to take in the sights. Kexar's men weren't stymied by the weapon dealer's death. In fact, they seemed further emboldened as the last of their leader's ashes drifted away. Exhaling slowly, Shaggy focused on his perception manipulation ability and looked around. The scene slowed to a crawl as his mind took in every bit of information his senses were sending him. Sense and XIV were at the front of the stage, fighting thugs. Shaggy was surprised to see Censor punching his entire arm through the stomach of a large greenish ogre. The guy probably had some form of super strength too, then. XIV, meanwhile, was firing away with her large pistol. Its comically large barrel was disgorging fire and enormous metal slugs into oncoming aliens. Mel, on the other hand, was charging into the crowd. Fists alight with electric powers. Each time she swung her fist, a large arc of lightning would travel through the crowd. The metal merchant stalls would take that charge and spread it further. Sometimes, the electricity would rebound and slam back into Mel. But the electric mutant would simply absorb it and throw it back out again. It was when Shaggy spotted Cutie that he winced painfully. The flying player was floating above the mayhem. But she was nowhere close to safe. Snipers lined the rooftops on either side of Kexar's little bazaar, and the butterfly-themed villain was dodging green laser fire. Thankfully, the large disintegration rifles took a long time to recharge. Shaggy looked around for a way to help the lone flyer. The three on the market floor were doing more than fine. It was then that 14's power slammed into Shaggy's nose. The redhead's pheromones drifted to him on a light breeze, and from his first inhale, Shaggy felt invincible. It was like his entire nervous system was on fire. He felt like he could take on the world. Running to the edge of the stage, Shaggy leaped toward the far building. Both of the buildings on either side of the market were brick apartment about 20 stories high. But Shaggy ignored the size as he jammed his claws into the build and started climbing his way up. 14's pheromones burned through his body, and Shaggy focused on the feeling of being unstoppable as he used his arms to launch his body higher up the wall. With each impact, Shaggy sent bits of dust and brick into the air as he climbed. Below him, the fight was still ongoing, and a few people even shot red and blue lasers up at him. The energy fire from the parking lot caught the attention of whoever was on the roof. Someone topside glanced over the edge at Shaggy, and he caught his first glimpse of the bastards. Unlike Kexar's normal lackeys, the person on the roof wasn't an ogre or a rock-type alien. Instead, it was just a humanoid in white and blue armor. Shaggy couldn't see past the visor covering the person's face, but judging by the chin that was visible, Shaggy guessed that the person was a male human. One with a large silver rifle aimed right at Shaggy. The rifle's barrel glowed green for a few seconds, before it blasted a long line of energy straight at Shaggy. Bracing himself, Shaggy tanked the hit and felt his nerves start to fry themselves. He howled as the pain seared 14's pheromones right out of his body. Shaggy felt his shoulder and arm rebuilding themselves as he glared back up at the shooter. The face shield covered the man's eyes, but his jaw was wide open as he watched Shaggy heal himself. The shooter ducked back over the rim of the roof as Shaggy got ready to launch himself upward again. 14's power had helped, but Shaggy was sure he could toss himself the rest of the way. With a mighty one-armed heave, Shaggy got himself to the rim of the roof just in time for Dingus to come back with friends. "I'm telling you, Mark, he took the blast and is still coming. It's the craziest thing I've ever..." Whatever the guy was going to say was lost as Shaggy jammed his left claw into the guy's jaw and lifted him off the roof. Kicking off the lip of the roof, Shaggy rolled over the ledge and landed, crouched and ready. Thankfully Mark was too slow in getting his own rifle up, and Shaggy was able to jab both his claws into the man's armored chest. Only for his claws to skitter across the bright white and blue armor. Shaggy swore as his claws made Mark stumble back a few steps. Growling, Shaggy followed and started aiming for the weak points in the armor. He jammed a slim claw into the man's unarmored armpit. Wrenching it upward, he ignored the guy's screaming as he spun and slammed his opponent's head into the ledge of the roof. With a satisfying crunch, Shaggy quickly checked his kill. Mark's faceplate was smashed in and blood was flowing across the gray stone of the ledge. The whine of an energy rifle made Shaggy dodge to the side. Flashes of green appeared in his periphery as he rolled to his feet and looked around. There were 5 more similarly dressed soldiers on the rooftop, all with disintegration rifles. However, it seemed that most of them had already shot their shot and were waiting for the gun to recharge. Shaggy smiled as he picked his target, the only person with a charged rifle. "A tertiary target has made contact with us. I repeat, one of our targets has confronted us. Be advised, he seems more powerful than reported." "No. We won't need help. We can take this mutt." Shaggy immediately switched targets and launched himself. Using his pounce ability, Shaggy felt the game take control of his body and use his powerful legs to jump. Shaggy got his claws into position, not aiming to clash with the clawproof armor. Instead, he wrapped his arms around the man's torso and spun out of the pounce. As his feet hit the floor, Shaggy went for a modified hip toss. But instead of throwing the man to the ground, Shaggy flung the arrogant bastard off the roof. Not wasting any more time, Shaggy retracted his claws and rolled toward his original target. She screamed as she recoiled backward, bringing the rifle up again. Not wanting to take another hit, Shaggy rolled to the side again and tried to come up. But a slim metal rod slapped him in the face and he bounced back. One soldier had gotten his melee weapon out and had cracked Shaggy in the face with it. Surprisingly, it was a slim white baton. Shaggy let his nose shift itself back into position as he checked his regeneration power. He was getting hungry. 2 blasts from the disintegration rifle were his new limit now. But the coil whine of the female trooper's rifle reminded him that there was still another of the damn things in play. Thinking quickly, Shaggy lunged at the baton-wielding trooper. To his side, he could see the other troops bringing out their own weapons and moving in. So Shaggy quickly got the baton guy in front of him and grabbed for his waist. Baton guy backed away and Shaggy gave chase, hoping the woman with the rifle was still where she had been. He spotted her over baton guy's shoulder, but before he could pounce, a large white mace came swinging across Shaggy's vision. Shaggy dropped and let the blow graze his head. But that wasn't all. Before Shaggy could get to his feet, a giant-ass sword came crashing down toward him. Shaggy summoned his claws and crossed them, using them to catch the gigantic white sword. Shaggy batted it away and rolled to his feet. The whine of the energy rifle still hummed in the air, and Shaggy made sure that the 3 remaining troops were between him and the shooter. They all had apparently abandoned their own rifles in favor of their weirdly colored melee weapons. Shaggy crouched low and held up his claws, waiting for someone to make the first move. He needed to get to the woman with the gun. That was the one thing he was sure could kill him outright. Although, Shaggy thought as he watched the hesitant troops. Slowly, Shaggy shifted his left hand back to normal and reached into a pocket. Grabbing a chocolate bar, Shaggy quickly jammed the thing into his mouth. Watching the soldiers watch him. They froze as he ate, one even tilting their head in confusion. A mic squeaked to life as one soldier spoke. "Command? The subject has begun eating a candy bar. Please advise." Shaggy couldn't help but grin as the trooper that had asked the question paused as the answer came. His jaw dropped in shock before an angry scowl appeared on his face. Pointing his mace in Shaggy's direction, the man shouted, "Stop him. That's how he heals." Shaggy swallowed as he scowled. These people have far too much information on me. Shaggy felt his regeneration power filled slightly back up. But he wasn't sure if it was enough to survive a rifle blast. He didn't have time, though. Sword and baton were charging and Shaggy had to move. The soldier with the large sword swung it horizontal, letting its enormous weight carry it through a wide arc. Shaggy spotted baton guy waiting for him to duck under the sword so he could crack Shaggy in the face. So instead, Shaggy jumped over the sword and brought down his clawed hands onto baton guy's skull. The helmet protected the guy from Shaggy's claws. But the weight of the blow made the trooper collapse, and Shaggy used that to his advantage as he lifted the guy back up and spun with him. Aiming for the guy with the mace, Shaggy tossed baton guy into mace guy. Not looking to see how that all rung out, Shaggy dashed past his throw, looking for the woman with the rifle. She was waiting behind mace guy, and when he toppled under the weight of his friend, she hesitated. Shaggy didn't. He rushed her and sliced both his claws up into her exposed jaw. She didn't have time to scream as Shaggy's long claws dug into her jaw and traveled all the way to her skull. He extracted his claws and turned to face the remaining 3 soldiers. Baton guy was on his feet and from Shaggy could see of his bottom jaw, the guy was red with rage. "Cheryl. You bastard." Baton guy charged, fist raised, baton forgotten. Shaggy grimaced as he reached down and grabbed Cheryl's rifle. With a quick backstep, Shaggy avoided baton guy's wild lunge and fired. The green laser blast caught the guy in the chest and immediately his armor went black. Shaggy watched as the energy traveled over the armor and came into contact with baton guy's skin. Once it did, that was all she wrote. Batten Guy became dust, still scowling at Shaggy. Kevin! Sword Guy shouted. Command. Cheryl and Kevin are down. So is our leader. We evac for 2 right now. Both troopers ignored him as he prowled closer. They didn't seem worried even as he picked up the pace. Shaggy spotted a weird blue circle appear under both soldiers, and he swore as he activated his pounce ability. His feet crunch into the rooftop as he launched himself. He had enough time to see Sword Guy shoot him the bird before both remaining troopers vanished into a swirling orb of blue magic. Shaggy soared past where the 2 guys had been and slid to a stop. But it was a futile effort. Both of the remaining troopers were gone. Remembering the opposite roof, Shaggy moved to the edge and looked across. But to his astonishment, all he saw was Cutie, sitting on the edge of the roof and kicking her feet. She waved to him when she spotted him and Shaggy automatically waved back. Hey, boss man. Are we coming up there? XIV shouted from below. Her voice made him look down and Shaggy could see that his fellow players had wiped the floor with Kexar's people. A sudden thought hit him and Shaggy grabbed another candy bar from his pocket and flung himself off the roof. He landed with a loud, solid thump and cracked the asphalt of the old parking lot. With a side glance at the dead soldiers he had thrown off the roof, Shaggy moved toward XIV and the others. Geez, boss. Censor said. Doesn't that hurt? Huh? Shaggy asked, still chewing. When he caught on to what the big guy was asking, Shaggy shook his head. Oh, nah. My bones are dense as hell and my defense is stacked. Even with my healing. You're the world's tiniest tank. Mel smirked. Shaggy frowned. And you're the world's biggest bug zapper. Mel stuck her tongue out at him, but smiled as she started looting the bodies. When she did, Shaggy remembered his idea. Oh, did you guys leave any alive? I have some questions. XIV and Censor frowned as Mel ignored him. No, boss. Were we supposed to? Yeah, my gun doesn't have a stun setting. It's mostly just a body perforator. Oh shit. That's what I'm going to call it. XIV, you can't call your gun a perforator. Mel deadpanned. Not a perforator. The perforator. XIV corrected. And I can call it whatever I want. It's mine. Shaggy saw both Mel and Censor shake their heads in defeat. Cutie deavened suddenly, her 2 butterfly wings fluttering as she landed softly on the ground. Hi. So, did anyone else's bad guys disappear? She asked happily. XIV, Censor and Mel all looked at her, but Shaggy shook his head. Just 2 of mine. They called in for extraction and got magically teleported away. Cutie nodded. Yeah. I did fly over and dusted those nasty soldier-looking guys. But once my dust had a hold of them, they teleported, or whatever, away. Someone want to fill us in? XIV asked, raising a hand. Shaggy turned and walked back toward the 2 people he had thrown off the roof. He waved for the others to follow. There were 2 groups at play here. Kexar's people and then the second group. The second group came prepared with disintegration weapons and fantastic armor. Oh, I'm taking that, Mel said as she dropped to the ground and started taking said armor. Why would they come so strapped? Were they Kexar's backup protection? Shaggy shook his head. I don't think so. I think they were his leash holders. Apparently, his loyalty only went so far. You can only scare people so loyal, I suppose. So, this was an ambush? I think so. But I don't think they were expecting me. Apparently, I am a tertiary target. But since I popped up here, they took their shot. I think Kexar was planning the ambush, and then these guys joined in to help. Not realizing who we were. Well, the dumbass sure know who we are now. Mel said, clutching a stack of armor in her arms. What's the plan, boss? XIV asked, smiling. We collect the loot and we make our way back to Nukes. Why not the cave? Because I don't trust that armor, Shaggy said, pointed at the white bit of metal in Mel's arms. It could be bugged. Magically or mechanically. We don't want to give our new friends any more hints about what we're doing. Mel and XIV nodded in understanding. Sensor was standing with his fingers to his temples. Deep in thought. Shaggy thought the big guy was listening for something. But the way his eyes moved under his eyelids made Shaggy think he was looking for something. You okay, Sense? Huh? Yeah. Just going through my memories, trying to find anything useful. Shaggy quirked an eyebrow, prompting the big guy to explain further. I have perfect sensory recall. If I focus, I can go back and try to see if I heard anything. You and Cutie were both on the roofs, fighting. Which is well within my range. Did the soldiers say anything? Cutie shook her head as Shaggy nodded. They spoke to someone at their command. But I couldn't hear the entire conversation. Sensor nodded. Okay, I'll focus there. Hey. How about first you help us loot? There's like 20 of those damn ogre thugs alone. Not to mention all the collateral civilians that got in the way. Mel complained. Shaggy nodded. She ain't wrong. Let's wait till we get to nukes. Prioritize credits. Although, Mel, there's another set of armor over there. Oh. Mel rushed off as Cutie rushed to help. Shaggy and the others started going through pockets. Ears peeled for any signs of cops or supers showing up. But the streets were silent. Even as they finished up and headed back to the hybrid's crowded shop. Shaggy tried not to focus on the nagging sense in his brain that was telling him he had found another exciting adventure. His prodigious luck wasn't that good, was it? The trip back to Nuke's shop was uneventful. But Shaggy spent the time checking his pack link. Mostly, his pack was worried about his own recent fight. They all seemed fine, and the few snippets he could get from Rita, Seacrass, and Ephemera were just bland reports about the boring neighborhood. Shaggy asked them to finish up and check on Levy as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Mel, XIV, and Cutie were happily discussing the fight. No way, XIV. Your new adrenaline pheromones kick ass. I felt like I could fry everything in that parking lot and still have more to take on Cutie's soldiers. Cutie scrunched up her cherubic face. I don't think so. Their armor was pretty tough. I carry that handgun. But I think all I was doing was annoying them. Yeah. How did you take care of them, anyway? Did you use that new ability of yours? Yeah. I flew around and started dispensing fairy dust all over them. Their helmets didn't have any mouth coverings, so they all inhaled it. So, how did it work? Mel asked excitedly. I don't know. Some of them dropped immediately. But others just slowed down and started stumbling about like zombies. When I closed in to finish them, they all disappeared. It was so annoying. Shaggy snorted. Sounds easier than going toe-to-toe with all of them. Their armor stopped my damn claws, and they were well trained too. Didn't you kill most of them? Mostly by surprise and by being faster. They let their guard down a little too much and got hammered for it. Now, though, when and if they come back, they'll be ready. Don't you have a crowd control ability? Cutie asked. Shaggy shook his head. Nope. My CC is limited to my pack. They got my back most times, but other than that, I'm pretty much a bruiser. But my high defense and healing make me a pretty good off-tank. Although I have yet to have a straight-up fight with a super strong soup. So why don't you increase the strength of your claws? I do. But we keep running into new shit that stops them. They are almost at a base level of 20, same with their sharpness. But the game keeps throwing new armor at me. Maybe for game balance? Who cares about that? If the game keeps throwing better armor at you, that's all the better for us. This stuff is gold. Mel said, pushing up the pile of armor in her hands. Shaggy eyed the white and blue armor with suspicion. He didn't really know if the troopers had any tracker tech or magic in the things. But he sure as hell didn't trust it. What he wanted to do was drag it back to Undertown and have Roald and Randa look it over. But if there were any traps or tricks on the armor, that would put the den at risk. Better to risk Nuke's shop than the Viper's den. Arg! Censor shouted, dragging all of them out of their thoughts. Damn it! All that work for nothing. Shaggy and XIV shared a look before the redhead asked. What's up, Sense? Not getting anywhere? The big guy shook his head in annoyance before he answered. I recreated the sense well enough. But when I focus on that area and listen into the conversation, all I get is an automated voice. So they were talking to a robot? Shaggy asked. No. More like whoever was on the other end was deliberately disguising their voice with technology. Wow. That's a level of paranoia I have not encountered before. Mel whistled. Is it still paranoia when it turns out to work? I mean, we were trying to listen in on them. Cutie said. The girls fell into quiet conversation again as Shaggy patted Censor's broad shoulder. Don't worry about it. You did your best. Yeah, I know. I just think this power was a terrible choice. What about that super strength you were tossing around back there? Censor flexed his chest muscles and grinned. This race is naturally strong. But it's not their primary function. My main power set is the enhanced senses, and I can only raise those. I could probably get stronger with exercise, but I haven't tried it. Super strong races need specific training tools. Shaggy nodded. Something for the future, then. I guess you can only work with what you got. Unless you were planning on rerolling your character. Censor sighed loudly. Nah. I like it, it just doesn't have the utility I thought it would. Also, it's all my senses. You know what eating spicy food is like with enhanced taste buds? It's a trip. Shaggy grinned as they engaged in small talk. It wasn't a long way back to Nuke's, but the empty streets made the walk pretty bleak. The neighborhood really needed a facelift. Maybe with Kexar gone, that would be easier. But they also just lost one of the major draws of their little slice of Austin. Shaggy shook off the negative thoughts as Nuke's shop came into view. Nothing had changed in the time they'd been gone. Although Nuke was entertaining a few customers. They ran away as Shaggy and his crew approached and Nuke sighed loudly. Can you all not move in a giant pack that screams, "We are criminals"? I need the few customers I can get. Sorry, Nuke. We have to move like this for safety. In fact, I'm surprised most civilians aren't moving in groups. What good would it do them? Most civvies are mundanes. They ain't got no powers to speak off. Those that do are often some gang trying to rule the world. Nuke looked Shaggy up and down pointedly. Shaggy merely shrugged off the accurate statement and gestured to Mel. Kexar is gone. But he left us a few gifts. Nuke stood on her countertop and gestured her lanky orange arms at the armor. Mel hugged the metal to her chest and looked hesitant to hand it over. A glare from XIV made the blue-haired woman sigh loudly and hurry over to dump the stuff on the counter. Nuke ran her orange hands across the armor idly as she whispered something to herself. Shaggy was trying to listen in when the small hybrid yelped loudly. Oh. God damn it. Shaggy, what the hell have you brought me? Nuke didn't wait for his answer. Instead, she grabbed what she could of the armor and leapt from the counter. Mel followed quickly, yelling in surprise. Shaggy watched as Nuke headed to a back door in her shop, knocking down clothes racks and various other items. Bring the rest of it. Nuke screamed as she lunged into the back room hurriedly, Mel on her heels. Shaggy shrugged at the others and hurried to follow her commands. He and the others followed Mel and Nuke into the back room, taking a moment to gasp as they entered. The back room was the exact opposite of the front of the shop. Where the front was a hodgepodge of random items spread out everywhere. The back was a pristine metal workshop full of work tables, benches, and tools. At the center was a large cage that Nuke was currently standing in. She waved a hand at all of them, ushering them over. They all crowded into the weird-looking cage and Nuke pressed a button on the lone desk in the cage. She sighed as Shaggy felt a weird shiver shoot through him. The air vibrated, and he was sure Nuke had activated some kind of magic or tech. When he gave the small hybrid a questioning look, she scowled at him. "What kind of government shit have you brought into my store?" Shaggy's interest went through the roof. "Government? Hey, don't kick the merchandise," Mel complained. "Huh? Merchandise? Ain't no one in hell buying that shit from you. It's hotter than a Magmarian in summer. Don't even think about wearing it, either. That shit probably has some kind of genetic item system that'll fry you the second you get it on." Shaggy pursed his lips in annoyance. "So it's completely useless?" Nuke nodded, but then stopped herself. "Maybe not. You could melt it down and forge your own armor, I guess. But that would take some heavy-duty smelting. Why not just get rid of the tracking shit or whatever?" "Because, Sally Bluehair, we don't know what all is installed on these damn things. Maybe if you had a government-sanctioned armorer or a talented alien with the right skill set, you could get rid of the tracking. But I wouldn't risk it. I was just asking you, jumped-up goblin. No need to jump down my throat. If you are going to ask a stupid question, then be prepared to find out how stupid you are." Nuke snapped back. Shaggy was ready to jump between the two when a voice echoed from the front of the shop. "Hello? Anyone in?" They all froze and, for some reason, everyone glanced at Shaggy. He balked under their stares and raised a questioning eyebrow. Nuke simply pointed at the door to the front of the shop, glaring at him angrily. The others merely shrugged their shoulders and waved him out. Sighing, Shaggy rolled his eyes and sauntered to the front of the store. For all they knew, it was a legitimate customer looking to grab some random item. Shaggy opened the back door and walked into the store. Plastering a grin on his face, he navigated past a few short aisles before he got in view of the front of the store. An alien was standing there, dressed in an immaculately clean white suit. Combined with the alien's own pale white skin, Shaggy was almost blinded by the guy. His two coal black eyes hovered in the vast sea of whiteness that was his skin. Shaggy saw the corners of the man's mouth pull up in a grin as Shaggy came into view. The alien removed his white fedora, revealing two short red horns. The skinny alien bowed slightly and spoke, revealing a mouthful of sharp, pointy teeth. "Ah, Mr. Robertson. I was hoping it would be you. Proceedings can move much faster when we have the local leadership involved." Shaggy felt his skin crawl as the man's black eyes scanned him. But he put up a brave front. "You have me at a disadvantage, mister." The alien's eyes turned into slits as his smile widened. "You can call me Mr. White. I represent certain interests in this neighborhood." "Lot of vagueness there, Mr. White. Would you care to clean some of those up, or will you be sticking with the man of mystery routine?" Mr. White simply smiled again and tapped a finger against his hat. Shaggy could see a black sharpened fingernail attached to the finger. The two stared at each other, waiting for one of them to speak first. When Shaggy leaned against Nuke's counter and settled into wait, Mr. White sighed dramatically. "I see you are as stubborn as reports suggest. It is one of my best qualities." "Quite." Mr. White moved closer, and as he moved, he seemed to glide over the random bit of junk on the floor. Shaggy could see the alien's feet contacting the floor, but the way the tall alien moved combined with how quiet he was unnerved Shaggy. Mr. White sat his hat down on the counter and stood next to Shaggy. Shaggy glanced up at the taller man and fought back a frown. Damn tall aliens. Mr. White was around 7 foot tall and his horns added a few inches to that. Tensing himself for an attack, Shaggy kept his eyes on the dark pools that were Mr. White's eyes. Eventually, the taller alien huffed in annoyance. "The people I represent have plans for this neighborhood, you see. They don't include a band of small-time hoods traipsing around the place. We have gone through a lot of trouble seeding certain elements into the area. This is the only warning you shall get. Move on, Shaggy. Shaggy bristled. Yeah, considering it was my small-time crew that helped remove certain elements from the area. I think we have equal claim to the neighborhood. Ha 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 ha. Mr. White howled with laughter. Oh, Mr. Robertson. You have absolutely no claim to the neighborhood at all. It is already bought and paid for. The people I represent would rather not have to remove a rather bothersome tick in the process. That is all. The people you represent. You keep using that phrase. Do your owners not want to be known that badly? I mean, I love a good mystery, but come on. Talk about pretentious. Shaggy delighted as Mr. White seemed to bristle at the word owners. It was a petty jab, but one that Shaggy was not above using. Mr. White sighed as he adjusted his white tie and twirled his hat on the counter. Ah yes, your little games. You villains do seem fond of needling your betters. Shaggy snorted. The last guy to call himself my better is currently rotting in a place worse than hell. Ah, that would be Master Coggins, wouldn't it? I apologize. That was a slip of the tongue. Your little slight seems to have gotten the better of me. I didn't come to trade barbs, merely inform. Your people have 3 days to vacate the neighborhood. Mr. White stood with such swiftness that Shaggy thought the man had left an afterimage. When his eyes caught up with the tall alien, he was at the entrance of the shop. What happens after 3 days? Shaggy asked. Mr. White stood in the sunlight of the shop's open entrance and put on his white hat. He leaned back and smiled a fong-filled smile at Shaggy before he answered. Terror, Mr. Robertson. Terror you are not prepared for in the slightest. Then, with a puff of air, Mr. White was gone. In his place were a few swirls of air and the slow rocking of magazine racks. Shaggy blew out a breath and leaned back against the counter. Every instinct in him had told him to crack Mr. White's head against the counter and be done with him. But that was only a stopgap measure. Whoever was behind the tall alien would just send more. Shaggy rubbed at his messy hair and groaned. He had left Undertown to get away from all this cloak and dagger shit. Now he was fully in it. He was thinking up the pros and cons of the situation when 14 stuck her head out of the back door. Hey, boss? Are you done? Because I think Mel and the little goblin woman are going to tear into each other soon. Then he sped away in a blast of air. Shaggy finished explaining as Levy nodded along. He was back in the caves beneath the city. Along with XIV and her friends, minus Mel. She wasn't going to let the armor out of her sight anytime soon. Nuke was adamant that the armor be taken somewhere else, though. So, after a little back and forth, Shaggy and the crew sequestered Mel in an abandoned building nearby. At least until they could find out what protections were on the armor. And you have no idea who he worked for? Shaggy shrugged as Rita passed him a ham sandwich. I have a couple of guesses. But nothing concrete. The guy pissed me off like only a corporate stooge could. Ephemera snorted. Pissing you off ain't a hard thing to do, boss. Maybe. But I didn't like the smell of Mr. White. He was too slimy and too sure of himself. Also, like far too many people recently, he knew who I was. But he didn't seem concerned. So either he was severely underestimating me or he had no reason to be afraid of you. Levy nodded as she stopped waving her magic hands around. A nearby pile of dirt fell to the dirt floor of the cave with a thump. Nearby, several blank-faced robots about 4 foot high started shoveling the dirt into a larger pile. The robots were part of the workforce from Undertown. Apparently, Randa and Rold had gotten Cog's old automator working. The Legion now had a cheap, expendable workforce. Even if they were stupid as hell. Shaggy watched as 3 of the little robots pushed a 4th one into their gigantic pile of dirt. They weren't the brightest of inventions. But Slink said that was on purpose. Ren's little gremlin friend, Randa, hated robots with an undisguised passion. The little green alien refused to make them any smarter in case they went rogue and started an uprising. Well, that's his mistake, right? I mean, we are all tough as shit. We could bulldoze this Mr. White asshole and his little stormtroopers. Tom boasted. Shaggy rubbed his chin as he waggled his head. I'm not too sure. The trooper's armor was some heavy-duty stuff. My claws couldn't get through it. Not to mention how well trained they were. His pack and the others fell silent as Shaggy ran his conversation with Mr. White over in his mind. They had 3 days to get out of the neighborhood or else terror would descend upon them. Shaggy did not know what Mr. White had meant by terror, but he would not let that scare him. Instead, he shook himself and turned to his pack. What did y'all find? Rita and Ephemera shared a look before they both shrugged. Seacrass, Stanley, and Vic looked annoyed, but didn't elaborate. Tom was too busy giggling at the slapstick robots to answer. Sybil, though, she was waiting for an excuse to divulge. Did they not get the leave or else message? Rita asked, but Sybil merely shrugged. Shit. Shaggy grumbled as he finished his sandwich. If people were moving out of the neighborhood, then it was becoming more worthless by the second. Smart money said they should just pack their shit and find a new neighborhood to call home. But that didn't really sit right with Shaggy. He glanced up at Levy to see her idly moving dirt around for the robots. She and a few other mages were clearing space for the new construction area. They were at the far end of the cave, ripping into the wall with magic. Lackeys and robots shuffled about the place, moving dirt and bringing in supplies. Levy's eyes were knotted in concentration as she carefully extracted a large section of dirt from the wall. She grimaced as she floated it closer and said, "Love, what are you thinking about? Some of us don't have the advantage of being able to read your mind." Shaggy huffed again as he weighed the pros and cons of staying or going. "I'm trying to decide whether we should stay and see what terror looks like or leave." "Boss, you can't be serious." "Yeah, we just got here. Besides, we don't even know who this jerkwad is. He could be a lying bastard for all we know." Shaggy nodded as his pack and 14's crew all spoke up at once. Putting his hands up, Shaggy stood. "Look, I don't like it either. But if we stay, we'll have to deal with a group that we have no information on. We don't know what they want, or even who they work for. What we know is that they are heavily armed and have the capability to teleport their people in and out of the neighborhood." "So we just switch neighborhoods?" Levy asked. "What's stopping this group from following us there and stopping us again? I think we both know we need to at least figure out who we are dealing with." "I know. I just didn't want to deal with it. This spy shit ain't for me. I'd rather these Wong rods come out in the open for a fair scrap. But they will not give me the satisfaction." "What about them rod things?" Seacrass asked. When everyone stared at the giant lizard man, he elaborated. "Them anti-teleport pylon things we got set up in Undertown? Could we get some for out here?" Shaggy nodded slowly as he turned over the idea. Stopping the teleporting bastards from getting away would be a hell of an idea. But Shaggy wasn't sure it would work. Seeing his grimace, Rita asked, "What is it this time?" "Well, we need some kind of frequency for the pylons to block. We can't just set up a defensive net and hope for the best." "The armor," XIV said happily, almost racing from the cave. "Yes." Shaggy stopped her. "The armor. But first, we need to get it to Undertown without Mr. White and his cronies finding out about this cave." "That's easy." We 14 waved a hand at Censor, Cutie, and herself. "Take the armor back the long way round. There are other entrances to Undertown. Then we talk to Rold and the gremlin dude and get our anti-porting pylons." Shaggy nodded. "It's a pretty boring delivery mission. You sure you want to handle it?" XIV shrugged. "I can't say we won't get distracted along the way. That's why I want to take my whole crew. But I promise to be back by tomorrow, maybe the day after." Shaggy rolled his eyes, but nodded. "Fine. You lot go get Mel and head back to Undertown. If Rold gives you any shit, come through the portal here and I'll handle it." Meanwhile, me and the pack will try to dig into Mr. White. I thought you didn't want to do any spy shit? Ephemera grinned. I don't. But while we are out there, we can start clearing the neighborhood. With Kexar out of the game, it's going to disrupt things for a bit. I want to get on with that. Also, we need to find out if he had any storehouses or anything. Hey, you could take a long walk back to Undertown with XIV instead of frying thugs. Shaggy said blithely. Sybil's grimace became a full-on scowl and Shaggy had to hide his grin as his pack mates chuckled. It was a solid plan and maybe they could find something before their time limit was up. Levy waved a magic free hand in the air, getting Shaggy's attention. Not to add to the list. But we also need to take care of the deli upstairs. We need it to look like a legitimate business. So we need to fix the place up, find people to staff it, and find a supplier for meat. Also, I'm sure we're going to need a business license of some kind. Shaggy groaned as he scratched his head. She wasn't wrong. They needed to set up several front businesses topside. Things to make them look legitimate and help them ingratiate themselves with the community. Not that there was much of a community left. Shaggy glanced at each of his pack in turn. Ephemera and Rita immediately turned away from his gaze. Seacrass grinned happily. Stanley gave him a pained smile, Sybil flicked him off, and Vic was just staring at him. Where the hell did Tom go? Shaggy groaned. Off in the distance by the cave wall, a voice carried through the cave. I'm busy helping move this dirt, boss. Don't mind me, I'm far too busy to help set up any businesses. Shaggy sighed loudly as he rubbed his forehead. He could feel the mirth in his pack mates, but he needed someone to stay behind and help. Making a quick decision, Shaggy pointed at Seacrass, Stanley, and Vic. You three stay here and help with the deli. Use whomever else you can grab and get the deli situated. Anyone gives you any shit, you go to Levy. I'll straighten them out for you. Levy grinned as a purple orb of magic engulfed her hand. Rita, Effie, and Sybil, you're with me. We need to find out what. Levy had started giggling the second Shaggy had finished picking his team for topside. Soon, Ephemera and Rita were laughing along with her, and it took Shaggy a few seconds to figure out why. He had picked all the women in his pack to go with him and, for some reason, that tickled his wife to no end. Shaggy exhaled from his nose and rolled his eyes. Damn it, Levy. I was just picking the most useful for the mission at hand. Sure. Levy chuckled as her magic wavered for a bit. I'm serious. Rita is my backup, Effie is the spymaster, and Sybil is for when shit hits the fan. They are all essential parts of the team. Seacrass and Stanley are brutes, no offense, that the team uses when we want to crush some skulls. Vic is the organizer and is great at spotting a threat. Set them up in the deli and ain't no one getting in. Levy seemed to think on his words for a bit. He thought she agreed with him when he saw her nodding. But her next words made him groan. That is all well thought out and a reasonable excuse for you to travel topside with your harem. You are excused to go frolic in the sunlight while your wife remains in this dark cave. Did you want to come, love? Because you know I won't say no to a little magical help. No. I need to stay here to help with the deli and to keep the lackeys in line. But I have to give you shit about your little harem as much as possible. It's a wife's prerogative. Shaggy sauntered closer to his wife and grinned. I don't think that's exactly part of a wife's purview. But you do you, sweetheart. I'll be back as fast as possible. Don't you worry. Levy grinned as she waved him away. No. You treat your girls to something nice. I'll be here sweating over a hot cave. Shaggy rolled his eyes as he gave Levy a quick kiss and returned to his pack. XIV waved goodbye as he approached. We're gonna head out now and try to be back quick. Don't get into any epic fights without us. You were just part of one. How many more do you need in a day? Bah. That was barely a back alley brawl. But this trooper shit? That's the real deal, Shaggy, and we want in. Shaggy waved her off. Then you better hurry. I imagine Mel is going stir crazy with only that armor to keep her company. XIV and her crew waved goodbye to everyone as Shaggy took in his pack. They looked eager and ready. Shaggy could feel their hunger and their need to hunt and run. Seacrest and Stanley were a little sore about being benched. But Shaggy sent them some positive thoughts as he turned to Ephemera and the others. Rita grinned wickedly at him as Sybil's frown deepened. You know you ain't my type, right? Shaggy rolled his eyes and turned to the exit as Rita and Effie cackled behind him. He was going to be eating harem jokes the entire rest of the day. He just knew it. Hopefully, they would find something to distract them as they scoured the neighborhood for Mr. White's troops. But for all Shaggy knew, they were just going to be bouncing through shitty small-time gangs. How many people could Mr. White really have? You just had to think that, didn't you? Ephemera said. Oh please, don't bring your superstitious crap here. I'm serious. For all we know, Mr. White isn't willing to send trooper after trooper into this neighborhood. Rita checked over her sword as they walked. All I know is if we run into a bunch of armored troopers up there, I'm blaming you. I wonder how that armor does against fire? Sybil asked, conjuring a fistful of green flame. Shaggy rolled his eyes. We won't get to see this time out. Remember, we are trying to be stealthy about all this. We need to clear the neighborhoods while looking for signs of Mr. White. This is not a free-for-all brawl through the streets of Austin, clear? Sure. Whatever. Blaming you. Y'all are the worst pack ever. Shaggy grumbled. Shaggy's claws swiped through the air as the swirling blue rings disappeared. God damn it. All your fault. Rita said, sheathing her sword. Nearby, Sybil's green flame spread out in a cone across the narrow alley they had been fighting in. But it was all pointless. The white-armored soldiers were gone. They even took their dead with them this time. From above, Ephemera's groan of consternation mirrored Shaggy's own. Shaggy and the others glanced up as Sybil stopped spraying her green fire. Ephemera's sweat-slicked face looked over the edge of the nearby roof. She blew out a puff of air before she jumped over the side. She crashed into a nearby dumpster, sending trash and paper flying into the air. Shaggy grunted and moved closer to help her get out, but the slim woman merely jumped over the side. She brushed herself off as she explained. I almost had a sniper when they transported out. I don't think they are wearing a belt or anything like that. The teleportation has to be magical. Otherwise, the corpses wouldn't be an afterthought. That's true. Sybil agreed. If the tech was equipment-based, then all the goons would vanish at the same time. Instead, they take the live ones first and then the dead. Or whatever tech is in the armor doesn't recognize them when they are dead. So they have to activate the teleport on the other side, Rita said, playing devil's advocate. I thought you said this place was crawling with gangs? Shaggy shouted. Sybil grimaced. A few hours ago, it was. These bastards must have started moving in after you had your little chat with the man in white. That has some disturbing implications. Rita said. Yes, but none of them matter right now. The streets are crawling with an enemy we can't loot. But at least we can still kill them. What's the play, boss? Shaggy looked at Ephemera and then at the other members of his pack. Sybil and Rita both looked fine compared to the smaller black-haired woman. She was clearly sweating and was trying hard to show it. Shaggy bit the inside of his cheek as he looked around. First item of business is making you a full whir. I should have done it when the pack size increased, but I just didn't get around to it. You sure about that, boss? Doesn't it take a while? I thought that was why you were waiting. Not really. Sybil answered for him. It just hurts like hell and you scream your head off. Then when it's over, you come out of it a werewolf. But she's only been marked for a short time. Doesn't that have something to do with it? Not really. Mostly, it's so people get used to the power they are about to wield. Also to see how they fit in with the pack. But with Ephemera, we don't really need that. Ephemera grinned as she clenched her fist. Oh, I am used to the power by now. I could use an upgrade. Shaggy nodded as he waved to an abandoned grocery store on the other side of the street. The small store was sandwiched between a defunct electronics store and a boarded-up building. The others followed as Sybil asked. Hey, boss? Will Effie get any bonuses powers? I mean, I got my flames, Rita got younger, Seacrest got stronger, and Vic got super eyes. I don't know what Tom got. Tom got the ability to be forgotten, and I didn't get the superpower of growing younger. Rita snapped. Shaggy slowed as they got to the grocery's front door. Wait. Tom got the power of forgetfulness? No. He got the ability to make people forget him if they aren't looking directly at him. It's pretty weak right now, though. That's why you can find him again if you look. Is that why I keep losing the little bugger? He has to practice it somehow. Sybil moved to the grocery's door and gave it a tug. It rattled without opening, and she forcefully put her shoulder into the door's metal frame. It screeched open with the sound of bending metal, and they all froze. Looking up and down the streets, Shaggy sighed as he saw bits of garbage drifting down the empty road. So if getting younger wasn't your power, what is it? I can see the weak points in things. Rita answered as they all ducked into the store. Things? Ephemera asked. Rita nodded. Yeah. Armor, people, buildings, I can just kind of tell where I need to hit something to do the most damage. Shaggy grunted as the smell of the grocery store hit them. Luckily, it didn't smell like any food was left in the store. Even so, the scent of stale air and dust permeated the long squat building. Pushing their way deeper inside, Shaggy wondered why he hadn't heard about these abilities before. Because you never asked, boss. I mean, Sybil's power was obvious. But did you not think the rest of us would be blessed with other gifts? It never really occurred to me. I mean, being a damn werewolf is already pretty huge. I didn't think you'd get little mini-gifts to go along with it. Stanley thinks it's to help fill out the pack more. You know, Vic can scout out enemies, Rita and Seacrest can hit them hard, and I can fry the bastards. Leaving Tom to what? Hide? Don't knock it, boss. It's helped me be a fantastic spy, remember? So we doing this? Ephemera asked as they arrived at the back of the store. Shaggy shrugged and waved a hand. I guess so. You ready? I just need to nip your arm and the change should happen. I'd say brace yourself. But that might make it worse. Rita added. Great. Ephemera said sarcastically. She rolled up her arm and grimaced as Shaggy approached. Just get it over with, boss. Look on the bright side, Sybil said. You can tell Levy that boss put his lips on you. Ephemera barked out a laugh as Shaggy nipped her forearm with his enlarged canines. Just like with the others, he quickly jammed his teeth in and out of the flesh, doing his best not to draw too much blood. He straightened up and glared at Sybil as Ephemera twitched. Soon the pale woman was on the broken tiled floor of the grocery store, screaming in pain. Rita and Sybil winced in sympathy as they watched over Effie. But Shaggy was busy gazing out the front of the store. He didn't think anyone else was out there. But he wanted to be sure. Then again, who in their right mind would hear screaming and run toward it? Heroes would. Rita answered his thoughts. Shit. Didn't think of that. Shaggy grumbled. Don't sweat it, boss. There haven't been any heroes around here all day. Even with us fighting across the streets and rooftops. No cops either. Shaggy quirked an eyebrow. Isn't that weird? Shouldn't we have gotten at least one soup or cop car by now? I mean, we've been fighting like crazy all day. Sybil shrugged. Maybe people just know not to bother with the cops anymore. Or there are not enough people around to care. Ephemera was calming down as they finished their conversation. Shaggy returned his gaze to the inside of the store. Empty white shelves and steel racks littered the store. Some were turned over, while others stood proud, caked in a thick dust. Shaggy could only guess how long the store had sat empty. A sudden crashing from the far side of the store snapped Shaggy's attention in that direction. From where they were standing, the far left wall was crumbling down. But thanks to the shelves and random junk in the store, Shaggy couldn't see what it was. But he could sure hear and smell them. See? Ain't no one here, Soras. We need to go, for them white soldiers come back. Sell, we just lost half our crew to a bunch of them soldiers. We need to get out of this neighborhood. Now. Yippee, you'll be the king of the trash pile. The gangsters continued arguing as Shaggy glanced at his pack mates. Ephemera looked a little punch-drunk. But Rita and Sybil helped her to her feet. Putting a finger to his lips, Shaggy crouched low and moved closer. He felt Rita draw her sword and follow as Sybil steadied Ephemera. Once the pale woman was lucid again, they followed along. Shaggy crouch-walked around a set of stacked shopping carts and tried to get a better vantage point. It sounded like there were at least 3 of them. But Shaggy's sense of smell was swirling with color. Trying to count the strands, Shaggy figured there were at least 12 of the thugs in the store. All ready and willing to fight. Although Shaggy thought he smelled fear on at least 3 of them. With a sudden jolt that made Shaggy stifle a gasp, his vision tunnel. He momentarily thought he was under attack, but a familiar feeling brushed up against his mind. With a tugging sensation, Shaggy felt his point of view shift and he was suddenly across the store, looking straight at the band of goons. The air around his view shifted and moved as whatever was controlling his vision moved. A smug feeling came down his pack link and Shaggy realized Ephemera was sharing her sight with him. Turning, Shaggy pulled his attention from the connection and looked back. Rita and Sybil had their eyes closed and apparently were viewing the same thing. When they pulled out of it, Shaggy grinned and waved them across the store. They would spread out and then hit the bastards hard. Affirmative feelings came from his pack, and Shaggy swung wide along the south of the store. Thankfully, the yahoos stayed near the hole they had made in the wall, arguing. Shaggy was about to pounce when the one named Soras spoke. "Look, I don't give a shit if you want to leave. You know the rules. You want out of the gang, you hand over your shit and go through the gauntlet. If you want to do that shit now, I got no problem running you through." Soras' enormous frame almost covered the hole they had made in the store. His red face and bushy black beard were glaring down at the shorter Rich. Next to the human man was an alien woman with large bug eyes. She glared defiantly back at Soras. But the remaining thugs were all tacitly looking away. Not trying to draw the ire of their leader. "Boss," one of the alien thugs said, as it scanned the store. "We've still got enemies in here." Shaggy didn't let the conversation go on further. Giving the mental order, Shaggy felt his whole pack move as one. Rita leapt over a shelving unit as Ephemera appeared next to Soras. Sybil was just behind Rita as Shaggy pounced. His target was the thin alien Soras had called Tone. But the alien was apparently waiting for something to happen. As soon as Shaggy was airborne, the alien spun and opened its mouth wide. Shaggy had enough time to see Ephemera rip Soras' throat out before a wave of sound slammed into him. Shaggy was flung bodily through the air. Thankfully, the force of the blow didn't send him spinning, but he felt blood trailing down his neck from his ears. A high-pitched ringing had replaced all sound as Shaggy crashed into the freezer cabinets at the back of the store. Shaggy growled as he grew his claws and charged back in. His hearing healing and the sounds battle coming in clear now. Screams and shouts went up as Shaggy crashed through the random junk in his way. As he got back to the fight, he saw Tone was unconscious on the ground, Sybil and Rita were fighting their own battles, and Ephemera was gone again. Shaggy dove back in, claws ready. He slammed into the side of a Paranadon, his claws easily scything through the rhino alien's tough flesh. They both went down in a pile as Shaggy wrenched his claws free and looked around. A flash of red momentarily blinded him as a hot feeling started in his chest. Looking down, Shaggy saw that his white t-shirt now had a hole in it. He found the source of the attack a short distance away. A tan alien with glowing red eyes was sweeping his vision across the store, a red laser shooting from his eyes and cutting through everything. Shaggy charged the guy and brought his claws up and through the man's thigh. As the man screamed, Shaggy saw surprise in the alien's eyes. Shaggy raised his left claw and sliced through the man's chest as he fell to the floor. Toward the front of the store, Shaggy saw Rich and Lupe cowering, trying to make a run for the door. Shaggy sent a mental order to his pack to not let them escape. He got confirmation from Ify and Rita, but Sybil just set the front of the store on fire. The couple froze as green flame engulfed the front door. Shaggy grimaced as he ducked around a troll-looking alien's lanky arms. Sybil sent him unapologetic feelings as he sliced his claws into the blue alien's thin chest. Shaggy felt a notification, trying to push its way into his vision. But he ignored it and pulled his claws through the thin alien's body. Bisected, the troll thing's screams petered out, and it fell to the floor. Nearby, Rita was slamming her sword into the rock body of another gang member. With every swing, she cut sheets of rock off the mutant. The guy underneath all the rock armor was hurriedly trying to get his defenses back up. But Rita's sword found a crack in the rock and she stabbed her sword through, cutting the guy's neck. Rocks tumbled through the store as everyone else stopped fighting. At this point, there were only 2 of Selra's crew left. Not counting Rich and Lupe. The last 2 thugs, a pair of insectoid aliens, had their arms raised in surrender. Shaggy looked at his pack. They were all glaring at the 2 insectoid aliens. Waiting for the word. Shaggy wasn't sure what to do. Part of him wanted to slice all of them up and move on. But something at the back of his mind was telling him to make use of these people. They'd been in the neighborhood. Maybe they had seen things. Groaning from the floor made Shaggy look down, and he saw Tone start to get up. Shaggy realized that the thin, furry alien was some kind of wingless bat. Tone rolled onto his back, revealing a short snout of a nose and beady, black eyes. Shaggy leaned over the groaning Tone. "Hey. Want to chat? Can you please not kill us?" Rich said, from his place near the wall. "I mean, we didn't want to do this, anyway." Lupe nodded as Rich spoke. Shaggy glanced and Rita and Sybil. Getting his orders, both women sighed and moved to guard the couple. Sybil absorbed her flames back into her hands as Ephemera moved to confer with Shaggy. She kept an eye on the 2 chittering aliens by the hole in the wall. Each insectoid alien was glaring at them, but they didn't seem to want to make a break for it. Shaggy noticed little similarities between each alien when Tone grunted. Shaggy chortled. "Do I look like a registered soup to you? I mean, how many people are going to make that mistake? To be fair, boss, you don't have the bearing of a villain," Sybil remarked. "What the hell does that mean?" Rita gripped Rich's arm and brought him closer as Lupe followed. "Well, for one, a remark like Sybil just made usually gets you beaten. But that's not your style. We know how you work, boss. We're just telling you how it is," Ephemera said, waving a hand for the insectoids to approach. Soon, Shaggy had the remains of Selra's crew arrayed before him. Tone was still on the ground, looking confused. Rich and Lupe looked scared as they huddled together. But the 2 insectoids had lowered their arms and crossed them across their large chests. Their red and green exoskeletons reminded Shaggy of Dave's armor. Except for the alien's obvious pincer jaws and ant-like eyes. "So, who the hell are you?" Shaggy returned his glance down to Tone. "Glad you asked. My name is Shaggy, one of the leaders of the Legion. We've been looking to expand into this territory. But between you small-timers and the yahoos in white, things have gotten kind of tricky." The mention of credits reminded Shaggy about loot. His thoughts sparked Sybil into movement as the short blonde woman started checking corpses. Shaggy nodded idly as he thought about what he wanted to ask. "Well, I was hoping you could give me some information about the area. We got a foothold in a week or so back." But now we show up and the place is a damn wasteland. Is this all from the bunch moving out? The two insectoid aliens chittered angrily at the mention of the wild bunch. But they didn't make any other moves. Tone glanced at them before he answered Shaggy. It was Kexar Market. Rich added. Someone crashed the joint. Now Kexar's backers are moving in. I told Selras we needed to leave. There are better credits to be made in other neighborhoods. Yeah. Lupe said, speaking up. With those white troops hoarding all of Kexar's weapons, the rest of us don't stand a chance. Shaggy snapped his eyes up to the bug-eyed woman. She shrunk inward under Shaggy's gaze before she straightened up and glared back. He felt a smile tug at his lips as a thought occurred to him. Rich seemed to read his mind as he got in front of Lupe. I wouldn't think about it. The place is a damn fortress, and they looked like they were moving everything out of the place. When was this? Shaggy asked, the smile not leaving his face. Lupe and Rich shared a look with Tone. The bat-faced alien scratched his chin. About 20 minutes ago. The place isn't far. But Rich is right. The warehouse is a fortress that you can only get to through a narrow alleyway. They got it trapped and guarded like crazy as they move Kexar's weapons. It's suicide. Oh. Rita joked. You just said the secret word. Yeah, no stopping him now. Ephemera agreed. Shaggy gave both women a mock glare before he turned his best smile on Tone, Rich and Lupe. For some reason, each one of them winced as his smile swept over each of them. Don't worry about us. Please tell me everything you know about this dangerous warehouse full of energy weapons. Shaggy saw Tone gulp in fear as Rich and Lupe huddled closer together. He didn't know why, but his inner wolf howled at the prey cowering before him. But Shaggy figured that a happy wolf was a good thing, right? The trip through the streets was fairly quick. The empty streets and the setting sun brought to mind images of a ghost town. Shaggy would have been surprised if the streetlights worked. But for now, there was just enough sunlight to cast a glow on the red brick buildings. They were approaching the supposed block. It was a large block of 3 six-story apartments. Although Tone had assured Shaggy, at the center of the block was a shared space that sat between each building. Apparently, it was originally made for renters to access the storage for the buildings. But Kexar had commandeered the space for his weapons storage. The only way in was on the northern side of the block, where a narrow alley, big enough for a car, came out to the street. A shuffling at his back made Shaggy look at their 3 new unwanted followers. The 2 insectoid aliens were following along behind Tone as the 3 walked 20 feet behind Shaggy and his crew. Rita scared but said nothing. Tone had made it clear that no one was getting into the warehouse. But once Shaggy and the ladies had set out, Tone and the other 2 had followed. Stealthily at first, but Ephemera put a stop to that. Rich and Lupe had long since run off. Shaggy rubbed his eyes, annoyed. No. Let them be till they try something. Maybe they'll draw fire or something. Shaggy nodded. Good to know. But I need you to do some scouting. Start with the southernmost building and work your way up. If you find anything, let me know with that weird remote viewing thing. Gotcha, boss. But what are you going to be doing? Drawing attention and probably fire. Like you ladies know, I'm not good at the stealthy shit. Rita drew her sword as Ephemera vanished and they continued up the block. What about us? Shaggy opened his mouth and shut it. He really didn't have an idea for Sybil and Rita. He was just going to walk down the alley and get some attention. Sybil snorted as his thoughts became apparent to them. Both through the pack link and on his face. Rita sighed as Sybil waved at the western apartment building. Why don't I head into this one and Rita goes into the eastern block? All 3 buildings share a storage space, right? So we can clear the buildings and meet you at the center. Sound good? Shaggy hedged a bit. Not really wanting his pack to take on the white-armored soldiers alone. Rita and Sybil gave him pitying looks as they read his thoughts. Sybil shook her head and hurried off before Shaggy could stop her. But Rita stuck around long enough to chastise him. "We got this, boss. Have some faith in us." "I do. But this guy's ain't no joke." Rita grinned, her red catching the setting sunlight. "We know, boss. But neither are we." With that, she ran back down the block and hurried along its southern edge, toward the east. Shaggy could still feel all of them through their link. He let that comfort him as he turned to regard Tone and the two insectoids. Snorting at their presence, he rushed toward the northern side. He had just turned the corner when he spotted something he hadn't seen all day. A truck. It was a large box truck heading into the alley. He grinned as he spotted 3 guards in plain clothes waving the truck on. They weren't wielding anything he could see. But that hardly meant they weren't dangerous. As the truck rolled down the alley, Shaggy walked closer, strolling as if he didn't have a care in the world. He heard Tone and his 2 friends stop at the corner as Shaggy continued on. The first guard to spot Shaggy was a lion man. Whether he was an alien or a mutant, Shaggy couldn't tell. But the lion immediately called Shaggy out to his compatriots, and the 3 of them moved to intercept him. Shaggy raised a hand in greeting. "Hey. Lovely evening, huh?" The lion man pulled to a stop about 15 feet away and gave Shaggy a once-over. His 2 partners, a human-looking thug in a lightweight jacket and jeans, and an orange alien with black hair and some kind of onesie, glared at him. Shaggy merely smiled back. "This is a dangerous part of town, friend. I suggest you hightail it out of here before you get hurt." "That would be a good idea." Shaggy nodded as he kept approaching. He saw all 3 tense up. "But it is a dangerous time and I think some weapons that are hiding down that alley will help me and my friends." There was just enough time for Shaggy to see the lion's eyes widen before he pounced. He let the ability launch him at the biggest threat and he summoned his claws. The lion man had enough time to get an arm up before Shaggy slammed into the larger man's chest. Shaggy grinned as he felt his claws dig into the lion's chest and arm. He even had the satisfying vision of watching the lion man's arm go flying. "Shit," the human said as he summoned a blue ball into his arm. Shaggy wrenched his left claw out of the lion's chest as he and his target fell. He swiped blindly at where the human had been. He felt the claws of his left hand rip through flesh and clothing. Screaming filled Shaggy's ears as he wrenched his claws out of the lion and stood. The human was recoiling from Shaggy's strike and the lion man was roaring in pain as he rolled about the sidewalk. But the orange alien was gone. Shaggy stood on the lion man's chest as he glanced around. He had a sinking feeling that the orange guy was a speedster. He tried to rush to the alley, hoping that the 3rd man had run off that way. But a sudden slapping sensation at his side made him freeze. A grunt filled the air as he turned toward the blow. The orange alien was standing there, glaring at Shaggy and shaking out his hand. "Did you just tap me?" Shaggy grinned as he turned to the alien. The alien said nothing as his body phased out of sight. Shaggy noticed the puff of air as the speedster vanished. Scanning the surroundings for the speedster, Shaggy reached down and silenced the mage. Shaggy's claws had created a large gash in the man's chest, but he was still annoyingly alive. Another smack hit Shaggy in the back of the head and he spun, claws out. A rush of air and a flash of yellow made Shaggy groan as his claws passed through nothing. The speedster was too fast for him to catch. But he was too slow to hit the bastard. Thankfully, the speedster didn't seem to be strong enough to hurt him. So Shaggy ignored him. With a casual flick of his claws into the lion man's face, Shaggy finished his business and started walking down the alley. It was a fairly roomy alleyway, all things considered. The 2 enormous brick walls on either side were bare, save for a few boarded-up windows. Someone had also cleared the alley of the normal trash or equipment normally found in the area. The speedster tried to batter Shaggy as he walked, appearing at odd angles and times. But Shaggy ignored him as he let his gaze climb the walls and rode ahead of him. Down at the other end of the alley was the center area. He could just make out 2 trucks and a load of people loading stuff up. Shaggy grinned as he switched to the roofs. They looked clear so far, but Shaggy took a big whiff of the air to make sure. When he did, he got a lot of odd smells. Metal, blood, sweat, sulfur, and a 5th smell Shaggy hadn't smelled before. But it was musty. His orange assailant rushed off as Shaggy got closer to the center. Shaggy kept his claws out as he waited for the speedster to tell his friends what was coming. He smiled as he took another sniff of the air. His senses were telling him that there were people on the roof. People in a metal armor of some kind. Suddenly, a rush of movement caught Shaggy's eye, and he looked down the alley. The people who were loading the trucks were now rushing about, and a blue glow suffused the area. Shaggy walked forward lazily as his enemies got situated. The metal smell in the air was joined by the electric smell of plasma weaponry. He could see the blue glow down the alley coalescing into white armor and weapons as he got closer. He watched as a woman bathed in blue light came out of it in a full suit of familiar white armor. Shaggy filed that bit of info away as he scanned their weapons. Thankfully, he didn't smell or see any disintegration rifles. But he figured it was probably better to hurry before they summoned some. With a whoop, he rushed down the alley. The troopers fired their laser weapons as Shaggy held his claws out and tried to find a target. But the troopers were annoyingly taking cover behind the trucks and in the storage areas. The air became thick with laser fire as Shaggy ran. His skin prickled as the lasers ate away at his skin. But Shaggy ignored it as he kept moving. Soon, the firing on the ground was joined by the troops on the roofs. Shaggy grunted as his pain resistance did its thing and he finally spotted a target. An armored person had stuck their body out too far, calling out orders. So Shaggy launched himself the remaining distance down the alley. His body went sailing as red and green lasers ate away at his clothes. Angling his claws upward, Shaggy hit the trooper in the side and let the person's armor redirect his claws. His claws were shunted upward and right into his target's exposed chin. The man gave a short-lived yelp and then went limp before Shaggy tossed him away. People shouted and guns fired as Shaggy took in the area between the apartment buildings. It was a large square with 4 large box trucks parked haphazardly. Troopers ran everywhere as they tried to pin him down with laser fire. But Shaggy ignored them as he tried to find the best target. But a sudden flash of blue pulled his eye to the south-facing building. A trooper and a large wooden crate were disappearing in swirls of magic. But his way was blocked by troopers. They pulled all manner of melee weapons. Finally, casting aside their laser weapons. Shaggy grunted as he dodged a white katana and countered. His target was too slow, catching Shaggy's claws in the chin. The person's jaw flew, and he went down screaming as Shaggy's head was smacked by a mace. All around him, Shaggy could see more troopers vanishing with crates of stuff. He grimaced and checked on his pack. Ephemera and Sybil were rushing to help. Their buildings were apparently empty. But Rita's Link was suddenly quiet. Shaggy jolted as the worst popped into his mind. His carelessly mented dagger-wielding trooper jabbed him in the side with his weapon. But Shaggy ignored it as he tried to ping Rita again. Rita answered his second prod with a rush of emotions that hit Shaggy like a sack of bricks. Suddenly, the back of the eastern apartment building exploding as an enormous wolf appeared. Shaggy tore the arm off his dagger assailant and grinned as Rita's wolf body went nuts in the small space. He briefly thought about wolfing out, too. But they would both be cramped into the space if he did. Instead, Shaggy focused on the troopers. The quicker they took care of them, the more stuff they would get. As Shaggy jabbed his claws into the armpit of a soldier, he spotted Tone trying to sneak his way toward the back of a truck. Shaggy grimaced as he ducked around a claymore swung by another random trooper. He quickly dispatched his new opponent and tried to find the bad alien again, but the man was gone. He didn't see the 2 insectoids either. Rita's large brown and red form tumbled through the space, crushing and biting anyone who got too close. She had bitten through a screaming trooper as a new sound crashed through everything. Shaggy saw the back of one truck come apart as Tone was flung back into the alley. An unholy roar filled the air, and everyone froze. "One's loose. It's loose," a trooper near the truck cried. Rita batted a large alien man away as Shaggy rushed toward the truck. Idly, he spotted green flames coming from the roof above the truck, and Shaggy checked to find Sybil clearing the roofs. Ephemera was still making her way through her own building, but she had been stopped by some troopers. Shaggy got to the side of the truck when something inside peeled its way out. The truck's metal side was torn away as Shaggy came face to face with a large furry lizard. Shaggy blinked as the thing's beady black eyes stared at him. It was large. Longer than the truck had been, and furry in odd spots. But Shaggy also saw green armored scales across the thing's body. Black stripes flowed up and down the thing's body, converging at its long snout. It opened its maw and roared in Shaggy's face, revealing enlarged canines and rows of sharp, conical teeth. To Shaggy, it looked like the unholy union of a tiger and alligator. Alligator? Tigator? Shaggy wondered idly as the gigantic beast lumbered toward him. The beast snapped its enormous jaws at Shaggy, and he braced himself. Catching the thing's jaws with his clawed hands, Shaggy tried to get his claws into the thing's skin. But its hide was tough and he couldn't really get an angle on the thing. He held the tigator's mouth open as its tongue flapped at him. But its strength was immense. Soon Shaggy had to throw himself to the side as the huge beast kept trying to snap at him. Rita wanted to help. But Shaggy sent her orders to keep killing the troopers. They needed as much weaponry as they could get. The tigator rushed Shaggy again, and he threw himself around the truck the beast had sprung from. When he did, he came face to face with another trooper. The soldier shot Shaggy ineffectually in the chest, but Shaggy backhanded the man as hard as he could. The man tumbled away as the tigator trundled around toward them. A loud screech echoed in the alley, and Shaggy saw Tone hitting the tigator in the side with his sound waves. The beast's massive side wobbled a bit before it turned and regarded the skinny alien. Shaggy saw Tone swear wordlessly as the Batman backed away. Groaning to himself, Shaggy launched himself at the tigator and clawed at it. The thing's roughly armored side stymied his claws, but there were spaces between the armored plates Shaggy could reach. He jammed a long claw into the space and held on as the tigator bucked dangerously. Ephemera sent Shaggy a mental ping, showing that she was now in the fight. Sybil was still burning through troopers as Rita rolled through the alleyway. Troops were running everywhere and flashes of blue were spiriting them and Shaggy's weapons away. With a grunt of effort, Shaggy got two of his long claws under the armored plate of the tigator and pulled. The big beast went even crazier as Shaggy held on. It tried to pull Shaggy along as it rolled onto its side. But Shaggy merely used the leverage to yank the bit of armor off. Another roar echoed through the alley. But this one was accompanied by a tail swing that caught Shaggy in the chest. He went flying across the small space and crumpled into the cab of another truck. As Shaggy healed, he felt Rita get fed up and charge the tigator. Her large wolf form slammed into its side and her teeth chomped down on its armored plates. Nearby, Ephemera was using her newfound strength to rip the remaining troopers apart. The smell of laser on the air was almost completely gone and the blue flashes were coming less and less. Shaggy could feel things winding down when the truck he was embedded in shook roughly. Another ungodly roar filled the air, and Shaggy felt Ephemera's annoyance. He mentally pinged the woman, and he got a mental image of another tigator muscling its way out of a small black metal crate. The crate had to be enchanted as the large lizard-esque creature pulled its enormous body out. Shaggy sighed as he calmed his emotions and tugged on his own wolf. Between Rita, him, and the two tigators, things were going to be extremely tight. But he didn't want to risk his people because he didn't shift. He felt the cab crumble as his body shifted and changed into his four-legged form. "Took you long enough." Rita's voice echoed in his head. Shaggy shook his lupin head as he rushed toward the second tigator. Soldiers dove out of his way as they shouted and he spotted Ephemera ripping a guy's head off. She tossed the thing at the still-appearing Tigator and vanished as Shaggy answered Rita. I thought I had it. I pulled one of its plates off. Noticed. Her voice said as the alley was filled with the sounds of a pained Tigator. This thing's hide is tough, but with some work, you can chew through it. Shaggy nodded idly at the information as he rushed toward the second Tigator. It was pulling its large tail free of the small box when Shaggy's front claws hit its face. Shaggy felt his nails get some skin, but the Tigator pulled away. It snapped its elongated snout at him and Shaggy danced backward, bumping into several more troops. He noticed the teleportation magic break apart as he bumped into them. Another bit of information that Shaggy filed away as he dove back at his Tigator. He reared up and over the thing's jaws, and he swatted at it. His claws left little scuff marks on the thing's armored plates, and Shaggy sighed. Rita was right, the things were tough, and this was going to take a while. A burst of green fire to his right signaled Sybil's arrival. The short woman had thrown herself off the roof and used her fire to backblast her descent. Shaggy sent her an unhappy feeling at the risk, but all he felt back was her elation that the maneuver had worked. She and Ephemera set about killing the remaining troopers as Rita wrestled her Tigator. His own was still snapping at him as it waddled closer. Shaggy waited for the thing's mouth to close before he bolted in and bit down. His fangs sliced into the thing's nose and waggled its giant head, trying to dislodge him. Shaggy wrenched his head around and got his back legs under the large beast. With a massive effort, he flipped the creature over and used his front paws to rake the thing's underside. To his surprise, the skin flayed easy, the beast roared in pain. Soft underbelly. Shaggy thought at Rita as his Tigator tried to scuttle away. Shaggy pounced on this new information and used his strength to keep the Tigator on its side. Once Shaggy had opened large gashes on the thing's underside, it tried to disengage from the fight. Unfortunately, there was nowhere for the thing to go. Rita and her own fight were near the exit of their little fighting square. Other than the large hole Rita had made in the eastern building, there was nowhere else to go. Realizing this, Shaggy's Tigator went on the offensive and snapped at Shaggy. But with an open wound in its stomach, it was only a matter of time until it bled out. Shaggy stayed back and let the thing tire itself out as it looked around. The troopers were gone, 2 of the trucks were on fire, and Ephemera and Sybil were arguing with Tone. His 2 insectoid pals were oddly staying out of it as the bat-face alien pointed around at the devastation. Shaggy inattention cost him a few bites on his front shoulders and legs. But the Tigator was running out of stamina fast. Soon, the large creature slowed to a complete stop and breathed its last. A howl behind Shaggy informed him that Rita was also victorious, so he quickly cancelled his transformation and approached Effie and Sybil. I deserve something. They know I was here now. They are going to come for us. Tone was screeching. You are not getting a truck, Batface. Forget it. This shit is ours now. Tone spotted Shaggy walking up and called out. Hey, I helped you with that first creature thing, right? Don't I deserve a reward? Shaggy snorted. How exactly did the first one get out in the first place? Tone went quiet as Sybil and Ephemera glanced between the two. Shaggy studied the alien's bat-like face. It wasn't that different from a human's aside from the nose and the tiny eyes. But Shaggy could read the guilt on the man's face. With another snort, Shaggy waved off Sybil and Ephemera. Let's get this shit loaded as fast as possible. I don't know if these people are going to be coming back, but let's not risk it. You're not worried about this shit being tagged? Sybil questioned. I am. But I still want it closer to home. We'll help, said a new vibrating voice. Shaggy looked around to see the red insectoid person raising a hand. Neither one of the 2 insect men had said a thing since Shaggy had met them. But apparently now they wanted to be helpful. The green one nodded along as they both moved to load weapons and crates. What the hell, Bud? Tone yelled. I'm Rin, he's Bud. The red insectoid said, nodding at the green one. Whatever. I thought you were on my side. Bud gave a chittering laugh. That was your mistake. We just wanted to see if the new leader was worth working for. New leader? Shaggy asked. Rin nodded as he threw a crate into the back of a nearby truck. Normally we prefer a matriarch. But you will do. At least until you die or someone better comes along. Leader is strong. Bud nodded. So we will follow for now. Shaggy wasn't sure about the for now stuff. But it was better than nothing, and at least they were helping. Sybil and Ephemera started too, as Tone sputtered angrily. Shaggy just stared at the bad alien until he eventually started helping as well. A patter of feet made Shaggy almost turn around, but his pack link told him it was Rita. What's a matter, boss? Does a naked woman scare you? Haha, Rita. Find some clothes and then get back out here. We need to do this quick and we only have 2 trucks. He could feel her mirth through his pack link. But the shuffling of bare feet told him that Rita was listening to his orders. As she rushed into the storage areas of the apartments, Shaggy glanced at the 2 dead tigators. He briefly wondered about taking those things too, but he brushed it off as he loaded the stuff. But his thought sparked something in Ephemera. Why don't we just shove them back into those spatial boxes? She asked as she waved at the 2 bodies. Do you know how to work with tigator hide? Tigator? It's what I named them. Shaggy grinned. Well, I don't know how to work the hide. But they have to be worth something, right? I mean, why would Kexar keep them if he wasn't going to sell them? They're dead, Effie. I doubt we could get much for them. Ephemera just shrugged as she stacked laser weapons in a crate. Shaggy stopped what he was doing as he looked between the 2 large beasts lying dead in the alley. Rita had nicked and cut hers to death. Random bits of plate and viscera were everywhere. Meanwhile, his opponent was fairly whole. I know that look, boss. Rita groaned. Shaggy shrugged. Hey, who knows? They might come in useful or at the very least be worth some credits. Fine. Sybil said. But you're stuffing them back in the boxes. Shaggy started to argue, but he stopped himself. It was his idea. With a loud sigh, Shaggy walked over to the enormous creature. The others behind them hurried on with their own work as Shaggy wondered how he was going to get the tigator back in the box. Shaggy wasn't surprised to find Kexar's trucks were free of any sort of mechanical or magical tracking system. They also had rotating license plates that Sybil was excited to take apart. Apparently the things activated freely once the truck was at a full stop. You could cancel the rotation from the truck's cab. But if you didn't, then the metal plate would swap several characters around. Sybil had spent their brief journey back toward the deli talking Shaggy and Rita's ears off about the things. Ephemera and Tone were in the second truck, following along as Bud and Rin were in the cargo beds of each truck. Rita and Ephemera had been adamant about splitting the 2 up. The 2 didn't really trust Tone, while the insectoid aliens were even more of a blind spot for them. When Shaggy had asked his pack what kinds of aliens the 2 were, all he got were blank stares. Insectoid aliens were pretty common, but separating them out into different groups was a chore. So most people just gave them the blanket term of insectoids. Rita and Ephemera had assured him that Bud and Rin had a name for their species. But only the 2 insectoids knew it. Shaggy shook off that bit of news as Rita gave him a hard look. His wandering thoughts had obviously distracted her from her own speech. After Sybil had spoken at length about the truck's rotating license plates, Rita had started in on an inventory. Shaggy had done his best to listen, but the information was so dry that his mind wandered off. Boss, I know this is boring. But could you at least pretend to listen? I mean, you just gave Sybil your undivided attention as she rattled on. Please extended me the same courtesy. Shaggy wiped a hand down his face. Sorry. But does it really matter? I mean, most of this stuff is going to the Legion. Obviously, our people in the cave are going to have first pick. But do I need to know everything? If shit goes missing? Yes. Which is why you should at least half listen. Stop worrying about the Bug brothers. Now, is that xenophobic? Do we know if they are brothers? Sybil asked. Rita nodded. Yes, they are far too similar in body shape and in the mandibles. Their dissimilar discoloration aside, I would wager they are at least clutchmates. I can't help it, Rita. I've rarely run into insectoid species before. Mostly, they were trying to kill us. I've been having this niggling thought about what they would look like as werewolves. You just met them? You're already thinking about asking them to join? I didn't say that. But you've seen Seacrass. The guy is a giant, scaled werewolf. It's impressive. So obviously it made me think what Vud or Rin would look like as a wolf. He has a point. Sybil nodded as she took a sharp corner. Okay, we've gotten off the point. Boss, we have 2 trucks full of weapons and armor. None of it is what I would call impressive. But we have enough to outfit our guys and then some. We could ship it back to Undertown through the portal, or they could take the long way. Honestly, I'm more in favor of the long way. I don't want our people transferring crates of weapons and armor through the streets toward the deli. Shaggy chewed on his lip as he thought it over. His paranoia that the crates would be bugged was waning a bit in the face of the logistics. Sybil seemed to feel the same. Let's just do a drive and dump at the deli. Then we can load up a truck with what we don't want and send it down. If anyone comes knocking, we can bust their heads in. We did it before. Shaggy looked between the 2 women. Sybil sat on his left and was leading the truck ever closer to their destination. Rita was to his right and was glaring at the shorter woman. They both had good points. Caution versus expedience. But Shaggy already knew which way he was leaning. By the enormous sigh coming from his right side, so did Rita. Fine. But I want round-the-clock patrols, and Effie is going to be working counterintelligence the entire time. And you are telling her, boss. Shaggy grinned at the red-haired swordswoman. Thanks, Rita. Why don't you handle the logistics on the lackeys while I'm doing that? Sybil, I want you building us a motor pool. Get us cars and trucks and kit them out. We've seen plenty lining the streets, but judging by the lack of people, I think they are free game. Grab some people and find a spot to set up. The short blonde woman grinned as she spun the truck's wheel. All right, boss. This is going to be so cool. They spent the next few minutes discussing their plans for growing their presence topside. Getting patrols scheduled and listening to Sybil rant about what she wanted to do. While Sybil herself wasn't a mechanic, she had an almost extreme interest in cars. Really, after Rita and Shaggy had agreed on the patrol sizes and other subjects, Sybil went back to talking their ears off. Except this time it was all about what she was going to do with her motor pool. They pulled into a parking alcove a block away from the deli under the cover of the street lamps. A few of the lights flickered here and there, but enough worked that the entire area was suffused with an eerie orange glow. Rita hurried after the truck's cab even as Sybil was still talking about the perfect spot for her motor pool. Shaggy quickly followed his pack mate and made to walk to the deli. But a firm hand on his shoulder pulled him back. Nope. Go tell your second-in-command why we are dropping this stuff off here and her new marching orders. I'll get the lackeys to come up. Rita said, rushing off to the deli. Shaggy grumbled as he spotted Ephemera and Tone exiting the second truck. The dark-haired woman wasn't exactly glaring at Shaggy. But her expression didn't bode well. Steeling himself, Shaggy walked over and sighed as Ephemera's exasperation hit their shared link. What the hell, boss? I thought this was too risky. Why are we dropping so close to the deli? She ended her tirade in a whisper as Shaggy leaned in close. Tone was nearby, glancing around at everything. But Shaggy ignored the bad alien as he explained. I called an audible. We can have Levy go over the equipment. But for now, the priority should be getting this stuff out and down. But that means I'm going to need you to do your spy shtick up here. Boss Ephemera practically whined. Shaggy stuck a hand up. I know. You just got away from a spymaster job and you don't want to restart everything again. But we need someone running counter-ops up here. Even if it's just gathering information. Shaggy. I hate being away from the pack. Ever since you marked me, being without a pack is damn near painful. I can only imagine how this shit's going to feel with me being a full were. Well, you're not exactly a full were. You still need to have your first shift and all that. Not the point, boss. Wolves are pack creatures. I need my crew with me. Being off doing the spy shit is fun and all. But I don't want to run it. Shaggy bit his lip. Not really wanting to order any of his crew to do something they didn't want to do. A fake cough interrupted their conversation, and Tone waved at them cautiously. Hi. It seems a position has opened up within your group. Seems like I could be helpful. Shaggy snorted. No chance, Batman. I don't trust you enough to lead our spying efforts. Ephemera poked Shaggy's chest forcefully. What if I watched him? Trained him up as a replacement? You know I'm a pretty excellent spy already, right? These aren't just for show. Tone said, pointing at his bat-like ear. Shaggy gave a half-nod in acknowledgement as Effie laughed. The dark-haired, pale woman disappeared from beside Shaggy. Tone's eyes went wide and he stiffened in place as he seemed to stretch his senses. Shaggy watched as Ephemera's slight form appeared behind the bat alien. Her hand reaching around to his throat. She squeezed his trachea as the humanoid bat briefly struggled. Shaggy almost interceded before Ephemera let go and chuckled. Ha ha ha. There's a lot more to the spy game than just listening in, Tone. But don't worry. I'll get you trained up. Step 1, we are going to work on logistics and paperwork. Shaggy wasn't sure Tone was listening as the poor alien was coughing into the pavement. But Ephemera didn't seem to care as she picked up the skinny alien and gave Shaggy a wave. I'm going to get this set up, boss. Don't worry. I'll make sure he's trustworthy before I join back up with the pack. Shaggy didn't have time to stop the slight woman as she ran off with Tone. He sighed and spun on the spot, coming face to face with red and green exoskeletons. Ah! Shaggy shouted and jumped back. Bud and Rin stared at him impassively. Their insectoid faces tilting confusedly at his antics. Shaggy blew out a breath and collected himself. Silent pair of bastards, aren't ya? Rin turned to Bud before responding. I guess that is correct. We never knew our father. But most insectoid races are matriarchal. So all know of their mothers. We are also highly skilled at moving silently. Bud added in their chittering language. Shaggy watched the pair's mandibles vibrate as they spoke the human language. But it still wasn't processing how they generated sound. He shook it off as game logic before he came back to the conversation. The pair were just standing near him and staring. Can I help both of you? Rin's ant-like head tilted again. We are awaiting orders from the Patriarch. What do you wish of us? Well, we are going to need to offload the trucks and get this stuff squared away. You two made quick work of the loading, but we have more people coming up now. Both insectoids nodded amicably before they went back to staring. Shaggy shifted under their gaze before a question he had bubbled to the surface. I really hope this isn't rude, but... You wish to know of our origins? Rin took up as Shaggy trailed off. Nodded happily, Shaggy watched as Rin and Bud shared a look. It was Bud who spoke next. The name of our species is impossible for the humanoid vocal system. But your scientist dubbed us the Fusus Formica. Rin nodded. A holdover from this world's scientific Latin. It means... Boss. We got news. Tom shouted from down the street. Shaggy turned to see Tom, Stanley, and a load of lackeys marching their way. Giving a casual glance to the insectoid brothers, Shaggy turned to see what Tom was yelling about. The short man was skidding to a stop as he spotted the two insectoids. But Stanley didn't even bat an eye. Boss, there's a news story going on right now that Rita thinks you'll find interesting. Really? Shaggy quirked an eyebrow. It's about our neighborhood, boss. Tom said idly, still staring at Rin and Bud. Some lackeys had pulled to a stop as Stanley and Tom gave Shaggy the news. With a sigh, Shaggy waved at the Bug brothers. These two are Rin and Bud. They are going to be working with us. I need everyone to get these trucks unloaded as fast as possible. We don't want to be caught out at night by some overzealous gang or our new friends in white. Sybil is in charge. Oh, boss, Tom whined as the lackeys moved to follow orders. Get to work, Tom. No slacking off. Stanley, keep an eye on him. Come on. I don't need a babysitter. Especially not from the youngest member of the pack. Shaggy said nothing as he rushed off to the diner. He wondered which of their recent endeavors had made the news. Fighting at Kexar's shopping market? Maybe their more recent assault on the weapon storage. Rita had knocked down a wall just a few hours ago. That shit was bound to make the news. As he rounded the corner to the deli, Shaggy looked skyward. He wondered if any news drones were swooping around. He almost missed the constant telltale buzzing of drones. He passed a few lackeys who were sweeping out in front of the diner. Passing through the broken door, Shaggy looked around. Vic, Stanley, and Seacrass had done some good work cleaning the place up. There was still a lot of structural damage, but Shaggy hoped they could get that squared away with some renovators. Vic and Seacrass were hovering over the deli's counter, their faces poised over something. As Shaggy got closer, he noticed the blue glow of a tablet. A clear voice was announcing the weather for the upcoming week. Shaggy stepped beside Vic and looked down as an alien in a gray suit explained about chances of clouds and other such things. Looking up, he raised an eyebrow at Vic and Seacrass. 1 second, boss. Vic said, puffing on a cigarette and nodding at Seacrass. The big lizard alien nodded and took a clawed finger and swiped it across the tablet. The news report rewound as Seacrass tried to find the right spot on the video. Shaggy watched the image shoot backward in reverse before the picture-perfect image of the newscaster was replaced with a new one. Now, instead of being in a studio, the video was showing a bug-eyed blue alien in a black suit. He was standing next to a shorter human-looking woman, and the two were shaking hands in front of a block of apartments. Shaggy read the ticker at the bottom as Seacrass hit play. It said that the head of the HLO and the mayor of Austin had just brokered a historic deal. A clipped news anchor narrated the video as the blue alien and woman waved to a crowd of people. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The chairman of the HLO, Ozarius, and our own Mayor Kennedy have just finalized a deal to see the first HLO-sponsored academy to open in Austin. While no statements have gone out about where the new Hero Academy will be located, Mayor Kennedy and Ozarius himself were seen in and around Brentwood. The pair appeared to be talking personally with store owners and building managers. Shaggy grimaced as he watched the obviously staged handshakes and smiles of the store owners. The blue alien, Ozarius, seemed to always have a fake smile plastered on his face as he shook hands and greeted people on the street. He recognized some buildings the mayor and the CEO were walking near, and Shaggy got a sinking feeling. Shaggy held up a hand. Okay. This looks shitty, but they could also be out near the North Loop, or maybe Crestview. Vic snorted as Seacrass swiped a finger across the tablet again. This time fast-forwarding. He found what he was looking for quickly as he jabbed the pause button and turned the tablet back to Shaggy. Shaggy's stomach dropped as he spotted a certain white-skinned alien with horns whispering to the HLO chairman. The two were just barely in frame, but Shaggy could clearly make out the face of Mr. White. Shaggy rubbed his face and groaned as the sounds of lackeys came and went. He leaned up against the deli counter and put his head down, trying not to imagine the shitstorm that was coming their way. Fighting off a cabal of unknown soldiers was one thing, but going against the HLO was a headache Shaggy didn't want. He was too familiar with their practices in-game. But Shaggy knew enough to realize how big the hero bureaucracy was. The giant corpo government entity spanned the entire world in the game and they managed all supers. Whenever players logged in, they had a few choices: join the HLO as a registered super, go dark and become a villain, or become an unregistered vigilante. Shaggy wasn't aware of anyone that had gone the vigilante route. Word was that the HLO stomped them out just as hard as they did villains. But the genuine power within the HLO was their close ties to the government. Not only did they have their backing, but they had their money, their resources, and their people at times. The two entities were so entwined at this point that taking on one would soon bring the eye of the other. Shaggy was sure he did not want to screw with the world government. At least not yet. Boss, it's not that bad. Seacrest tried and failed to cheer him up. Shaggy could feel the big lizard's earnestness, so he didn't snap at him. Instead, he slammed his head on the counter and tried to think of a way around this. He heard the sounds of footsteps all around as the lackeys moved crates of weapons down to the cave. It wouldn't be enough. Nothing they did would be enough, not against the HLO. Sure, the troops in white were a pain in the ass. But that was just the appetizer. If the HLO couldn't excise them with those forces, then they'd probably send something else. Vic, Shaggy asked, sighing. Could you go and get my wife, please? I think this is a conversation for a smarter brain than mine. Vic said nothing as he took another drag on his cigarette. He gave Shaggy a slow nod before he followed the latest batch of lackeys down. Seacrest gave him a few pats on the back and tried to take his mind off what he had just discovered. Come on, boss. Why don't you take a look around? We've fixed the place up pretty well. I mean, we still need to fix the broken tiles and the windows. But we cleaned the place up, right? Shaggy gave the big scaly oaf a grin as he let himself be led around. Seacrest wasn't wrong. Aside from the obvious broken bits of furniture, the deli was coming along. He headed to the back kitchen to check the meat locker and the preparation table. But he spotted something in the deli's main office that made him freeze. A sleek silver terminal was sticking up from the ground, on the opposite side of the room from the office's broken desk. Seacrest noticed he stopped and scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Yeah, sorry. We haven't gotten that desk out yet. Vic said we might be able to fix it. So we didn't want to just throw it out. Shaggy nodded dumbly as he kept his eyes locked on the terminal. With an almost reverence, he slid his hands over the thing's holographic keyboard. The thing's blue screen interface came alive and Shaggy was inundated with windows. Business acquired. Business type, deli. Power supply, city. Product, meat. Income, 0 credits. Expenses, 400 credits, business license. 300 credits, occupancy certificate. 100 credits, food handling. 1,000 credits, utilities. Employees, 0. Current operation status, illegal. Click here to start paperwork for legal status. Notification. You're currently in possession of an illegal business. You can continue to operate as you see fit. However, the government will eventually be notified of your illegal operation. If you wish to continue operation, you need to file all the required paperwork with the city. If you have any outstanding warrants or are otherwise engaged in criminal activity, this will be held against you when applying for a permit. Please refer to the Player's Guide to fully understand player-owned businesses in modern age online. Shaggy grimaced as he swiped the two screens away and tried to dive into the terminal's menus. But much of the menus were blocked off from him. Unlike in Undertown, businesses topside apparently had a whole host of rules they had to jump through. Shaggy had every intention of operating the deli business illegally. But with the news about the HLO and their plans, he wasn't even sure if they were going to stay, much less keep a business. But he soon shook that hopeful thought away. Knowing his luck, the bastards were coming, and they were more than willing to play dirty while smiling at the cameras. Again, Shaggy felt the urge to just bail. But an even stronger urge was growing in the pit of his stomach. He had already smacked a well-known villain to the curb. How would it feel to give the HLO a cut lip? Sure, they were this monolithic organization in the game. But so what? Wasn't challenging such forces the point in not only playing games, but being a villain was, well, dear. You have that creepy look on your face again, Levy said from the doorway. Shaggy snorted. You married that creepy face. So what does that say about you? Levy shrugged. I'm a freak. What can I say? So what did you find? She walked over to look at the terminal. She silently read the notifications on the screen and let out a low whistle. Rubbing Shaggy's shoulders, she asked. So, are we operating illegally, then? That was the plan. But some new information has come to light that is going to make that tricky. Those new soldiers being more trouble than we thought? Bigger than that, Shaggy said, switching the terminal to in-game mode. He brought up the recent newscast and played it for Levy. She watched in silence as the HLO leader and the mayor of Austin traipsed about their new neighborhood. When Mr. White appeared on screen, whispering in Ozarius' ear, Shaggy paused and pointed the alien out. That's the Mr. White that threatened us. Levy's eyes took in the man's features and then moved to Ozarius. Her mind clearly working out the problem. We're screwed, she said simply. Yeah, that was my thought. Shaggy nodded. But you don't seem that worried. Shaggy waggled his head noncommittally. Yes, and no. If I've read the situation right, Mr. White is strong-arming people out of this neighborhood to make way for the HLO's new academy. Now if that was public knowledge, the bastards would be in hot water. Regardless of their connections. The court of public opinion would fry them. So Ozarius has his man doing things on the DL. Which means that they can't be too overt about what they are doing. They still have the superior force. If we try to outfight them, we'll get annihilated in a war of attrition. Shaggy ran his hands through his messy hair. I know. But I was thinking maybe if we recorded some of the goings-on around the neighborhood, that might get them to back off. You know, post things on the game's version of social media? We could start an online campaign to save the neighborhood? That's going to bring a lot of attention to us, Shaggy. We're criminals. We absolutely don't want that. He and Levy fell into silence as they considered the problem. Shaggy was getting a headache at the thought of moving all their people and shit to another venue. It was going to be a pain in the ass, and the feeling in his stomach was still roiling. His inner wolf was damn near rebelling at the thought of backing down. It also left a sour taste in Shaggy's mouth, but he didn't know how to come at the problem. What if Levy started? What if we went legit? Shaggy raised an eyebrow and Levy put up a hand to stall any complaints. I mean, just on paper. Why don't we do everything above board while we are topside? The business, the people, the paperwork. Everything. If the HLO is going to be underhanded, why don't we try to keep things on the up and up? I am literally a recognized criminal, babe. They'd throw me in jail the first chance they got. Levy put her chin in her hand as she thought through the problem out loud. True. But what do they have on you? Really? A few counts of vigilantism? Maybe evading arrest? Murder, grand theft auto, endangering minors, unlawful transformation, assault. The list goes on, Levy. Shaggy sighed happily. Levy rolled her eyes at him. How much of that can they prove, though? Shaggy racked his brain as he thought about all the villainous shit he had done. A lot of it had been behind the scenes. There was the riot when the wild bunch stampeded through the area. Also, he had escaped police custody that one time. Not to mention his little jaunt through the city as a werewolf. When he brought these instances up to Levy, though, his wife smiled. That's nothing, love. I mean vigilantism and escaping custody? We can argue those away, I'd bet. I mean, we tell them that the police convoy was hit by some random gang and you went into hiding. And my escape from prison? I mean, that one is pretty hard to argue. Not to mention my brief run through the city way back when. That was before your upgrades, though. You were still a brown wolf at that point. But you're not anymore. A good lawyer could get that dismissed, I bet. Besides, this is only if the police come calling. Until then, we operate everything by the books. We can even use the lackeys as the front people for the businesses. We can keep ourselves behind the scenes as silent partners." Shaggy chewed on the thought as his inner wolf hummed happily. Both he and it were somewhat satiated by the thought of not running away. He wasn't as sure as Levy about him being able to beat his criminal rap. He had been fairly prolific in his villainous activities. In fact, he wagered he was at least a B-tier threat now. They weren't just going to ignore a B-tier threat out in their neighborhood. But her plan to use the lackeys was a good one. As he fully considered the plan, Levy moved to the terminal and hit a few keys. After a bit, she pointed at the hollow screen. "Dear, what is this A-class meat we apparently have in the store?" Shaggy blinked. "What? We have something classified as A-class chimera meat in our store right now." Shaggy blinked for a few seconds before he hurried out of the office. Sprinting through the small kitchen, Shaggy leapt the front counter and raised his hands. "Everyone freeze." All the lackeys in the store froze, arms weighed down by the crates they were carrying. Shaggy scanned them all before he spotted the crate he was looking for. The black metal spatial crate was held between two large alien lackeys. Pointing a finger at the pair, Shaggy waved them over. "You two, I want that crate in the freezer ASAP." "Where's the other one?" I think it's down in the cave, boss," said another lackey. "Well, get it and bring it back up. That's some high-grade meat. We're going to need it for the store." After getting a few affirmatives, Shaggy turned back to the deli counter. Levy and Seacrass were standing there, staring as the lackeys got back to work. With a sigh, Shaggy propped his arm on the countertop and looked around. The place still needed a bunch of work. But with the terminal now up and running, they might be able to get a lot of done with the judicious use of credits. Smiling up at his wife, Shaggy said, "You know, love, I think we might just be able to do this. We are going to have to keep our proverbial noses clean. But I think we should take a run at it." "Indeed. So who do we want to use to run this little shop?" "None of your pack either. We want to keep our businesses away from your known associates." Shaggy sighed as he looked around the shop. Lackeys were still moving crates around, even as the sky grew darker outside. They were going to have to grab someone and input their information into the terminal. But it was a good smokescreen for their actual dealings. He was still a little apprehensive about going against the HLO. But Shaggy couldn't deny the thrill it gave both his gamer senses and his inner wolf. Toppling giants is what gamers did, or, at the very least, they'd give the damn bastards a black eye. A very helpful lackey, named Franklin, allowed them to use his name and information for the various licenses they needed. However, that meant that Shaggy was stuck at the terminal for hours on end just filling out digital paperwork. Franklin had stuck around as well for the various confirmation scans. Facial scan, fingerprints, rapid background check and other scans. Surprisingly, Franklin actually had no criminal record. He was just one of the lost souls of Undertown, trying to make his way. Sure, now they would have to keep the poor guy hidden away for the foreseeable future. But for now, they had the start of a legitimate business. Also, as a bonus, when they were questioning the lackeys, several had stepped forward as business majors. Apparently, getting a job with a degree was just as difficult as in the real world. So now Levy was off planning a competitive business empire while Shaggy was stuck doing the paperwork. Most of the terminal's functions were still locked away until the paperwork went through. But everything was sent to the city office, then sent back, checked over again and confirm, then they'd send more paperwork. Shaggy would fill that out and file it with the requisite offices. But most of those offices were closed at night. There are entire species of aliens that are nocturnal. Can they not staff a night crew with those people? "Hey! What do you mean, those people?" Franklin joked. Shaggy smiled, but didn't turn to look at the man. He had been good enough to stick with Shaggy through all the paperwork. Although he hadn't offered to help. Which Shaggy made a mental note on. He was sure the guy was just in here to avoid working like the other lackeys. A bunch of those nocturnal aliens were moving about the deli, fixing things up and making everything look nice. They had already gotten the weapons stored away and the 2 trucks were on their way to Undertown. Now all they had to do was save a neighborhood. One business at a time. But once the paperwork was in, they would be the unruly tick on the HLO's arm. The bastards would have to burn the Legion out. Which Shaggy was sure they would do, or at least try. Ping. A quiet ping sounded from the terminal, and Shaggy returned his gaze to the screen. It was another notice from the city office. This one explaining that the files had been issued to their respective parties, and they were awaiting confirmation. Once they received confirmation, the city offices would send another notice to Shaggy stating that they had confirmation. But he wasn't about to do anything until the confirmation was then sent off to him. Then he was to send his own confirmation back to the city office, and they would keep both confirmation in their records. Shaggy rubbed his eyes and reread the whole notice again. It sounded like they were telling him they were going to send a notice, to let him know they got a notice, so that it could be sent to him. After which he would then send it back. I'm done. Night's over, everyone. Pack it in. Bureaucracy has killed fun again. Shaggy growled as he threw his hands up and walked out of the office. Franklin followed along, looking sad as Shaggy passed through to the main room. Lackeys everywhere were cleaning the place and making it look nice. Shaggy grinned for a few seconds, and then his brain traveled back to the notices on the terminal. Frowning, he left the deli, reminding everyone to post a guard. He traveled through the tunnel entrance and into the dirt tunnels before he finally got back to the dark cave they called home. A bunch of the lackeys tiredly walked off as soon as they entered the cavern. Off to their own slices of the circular room. Shaggy waved off Franklin and headed toward his and Levy's house. Their log cabin was done and built, but they still needed furniture. He made a mental note to steal some in the morning. Getting to his cabin's porch, he found Levy standing there looking haggard as 3 lackeys pestered her with questions. Shaggy noted that his wife's hands were glowing purple, and he quickly got between her and the NPC's peons. They glared at him for a few seconds before they realized who he was. Oh. Boss. What are you doing here? I live here. What are y'all doing pestering my wife? She's likely to fry your dumbass where you stand. All 3 men gulped audibly before the lead one answered for the group. Sorry, boss. But we were just wondering what the plan was for us. I mean, you asked about our degrees, so you have to be thinking about setting up some businesses, right? We can help with that. This gang life isn't really for us. Although mostly it's been manual labor. Shaggy rubbed his brow before something occurred to him. Great. Y'all can go up and man the terminal. We're waiting for confirmation on some things. Boss, did you not fill out an expedience form? Yeah. You need to file a BZ 976 form. That form is okay for standard confirmations. But I don't know if it works in this context. Maybe we should. The 3 business majors were building up to a full-blown business meeting. So Shaggy quickly waved them off. Yeah. Go do that stuff. I'm going to talk to my wife. Now get. All 3 men scurried away, still discussing random forms and procedure. When Shaggy turned to regard Levy, though, he found she had adopted a pitying expression. Trying to work out what her look meant, Shaggy tilted his head in confusion. Dear, you have to give them access to the terminal. Levy said knowingly. Arg. Shaggy shouted as he tore off back down the tunnels. One quick trip back up to the deli and the down again, and Shaggy was cracking open a beer and sitting on the floor of his cabin. Levy was chuckling quietly as she cast some kind of spell on the walls of the house. Once she was done, she joined him on the floor and smiled at him. Shaggy tried to maintain a stoic expression, but he couldn't help but grin as Levy bumped his shoulder with hers. It's all right, dear. Once we get everything set up, most of the business stuff will take care of itself. I know. But all this technically stuff is killing me. What kind of game has this much paperwork? I mean, really? Levy shrugged. The way the forums tell it, that's only the case out here. The East and West Coast HLO are far more lenient. But the one in Texas is a pain in the ass. What the hell is that about? Apparently, it has something to do with that guy, Osiris. They say he's a real hardass about a bunch of shit. Great. Well, at least we aren't directly dealing with that asshole then. We just have the speedy Mr. White to deal with. Levy sneaked his beer and took a sip before she replied. Don't worry. This will work, and once we have our legitimate businesses set up, we can start our illegal ones. Shaggy laid back on the hardwood floor. Like what? I don't know. Gun running, illegal gambling, fight rings, or anything else we can think of. With those business majors, we can even set up some money laundering or something. We're going to need an accountant. Shaggy added. Well, we'll find one. Levy said, leaning down next to him. We logging off for the night? Yeah. Let me just finish this, Shaggy said, tilting his beer back and draining it. Once the drink was gone, the two laid like that for a few more seconds until they both logged off. Shaggy was a bit worried, knowing that a full day was going to pass before they could log back in. But he had faith that his crew could handle it. Logging back in, Shaggy was braced for the sounds of combat and shouting. But nothing happened. Levy phased in right next to him in their log cabin and chuckled softly at his tense mood. She had been the one to fill his head all day with dark thoughts. She gave him a quick peck on the cheek before she went off to accomplish her own goals for the day. Shaggy followed, his heart rate settling once, seeing that their entire cave hadn't been invaded. Stepping out onto the porch, Shaggy saw multiple lackeys moving every which way across the dark cave. The magical light in the sky was working its non-existent ass off to provide some light. Thankfully, the lamps they had stolen added a much-needed boost. Rita and Ephemera were waiting just outside his cabin. They both gave Levy a nod as Shaggy blinked at the third person outside his house. Franklin was wringing his hands nervously as he glanced at everyone. Shaggy quirked an eyebrow, but Ephemera just grinned at him while Rita waved Franklin forward. The nervous man stepped forward cautiously. Yeah, boss. We got the business all set up in my name. I had to give an interview to an inspector. But it went well, and the Jonas and the other guys say the business is almost ready. We just need to renovate and get some inventory. Shaggy nodded as Rita snorted angrily. Tell him the bad news, Frank. Franklin jolted at the woman's angry tone. Well. We've hit a snag with procuring inventory. Jonas and the others have reached out to suppliers, but no one will work with us. Not to mention, we had to go pretty far. There aren't that many stores still in our neighborhood. Shaggy rubbed his face and nodded slowly. That made sense. The HLO had to have scared off most, if not all, of the shop owners by now. He did a quick stretch before he walked off his deck and started marching toward the cave exit. Rita and Ephemera following behind. He glanced over his shoulder at the two, silently asking for their reports. Tone is doing fairly well. He has a good head for spy work, but not really the management type. I'm going to have to watch him for the foreseeable future. Shaggy wondered why she was here then, and the pale woman answered his unasked thought. Because the guy is too weak. He's currently unconscious from exhaustion or something. I'll be back in time to continue his training. Shaggy nodded and waited for Rita. The redhead was silent for a long while, and Shaggy tried to get a feel on her emotions. For some reason, the woman was worried. Boss. The pack is concerned about this going legit stance we are currently taking. It's fake. Shaggy said quickly, trying to remember if he had informed his pack about the plan. Feeling Rita's relief through the pack bond, he was guessing not. She gave a quick sigh, before her usual taciturn nature came back. You could have told us. We see you setting up a legit business venture, and you and Levy go off again. We were beginning to think you'd gone soft. Shaggy snorted. Not likely. But we have to play things differently for now. The HLO is involved in this neighborhood. So we need to keep our noses clean and appear as aboveboard as possible. Shit. So what does that mean? It means we are going to have to be careful. Thankfully, the city and the HLO don't have any drones out this way. But we still want to do things like civilians. So no stealing, no fighting, and no robbing. Shaggy nodded as they walked up the tunnels and into the maintenance hallways beneath the neighborhood. Turning down the right path, Shaggy said. I know. But we have to be sneaky on this one. If we are going to give the HLO a black eye, we need to sneak up on them first. They are currently trying to oust everyone in the neighborhood, so we need to dig in. Also, we need to make sure the other store owners stand their ground as well. Ify, I need to know what's still open around us. Rita, can you and the others go on a supply run? Hit up Levy for the credits and buy whatever we need. Make sure you're seen doing it if you can. We need them to think we're legit, remember? Yes, boss. Both women said, although with different levels of enthusiasm. Rita was still a little surly at having to be a productive member of society. But there was nothing they could do. At least not yet. Both women broke off to go accomplish their task as Shaggy caught sight of Franklin again. The guy was walking several steps behind them and looking lost. Shaggy gave a mental sigh as he waved the tall man forward. Together, they arrived at the stairs to the deli and ascended. Once inside, Shaggy was surprised to find the place packed with a bunch of layabout lackeys. Most taking cigarette breaks and some talking over cups of coffee. Shaggy growled loudly, making all the lackeys in the room jolt to attention. Seems y'all have had a great break. Why don't all of you get your asses back down to the cave and help there? Huh? With some minor grumbling, the humans and aliens snuffed out their smokes and marched down into the tunnels. Once the room was empty, Shaggy spotted Stanley and Tom beside the counter. They both gave him a wave and Shaggy shook his head. What? We're playing guard dogs, boss. Tom said. We gotta protect our business interest, you know. Uh-huh. Has anyone even come by at all? Surprisingly, both men nodded as Stanley pulled out a notepad. Yeah, we had several armored patrols walk the streets. When they caught sight of the lights being on in here, they watched us for a few hours. But they have since disappeared. We've also had a few of the less savory members of the community try to stick their heads in. But the boys gave them a good scare. Supposedly, we got the construction workers coming round for a look at the place. But they are beyond late at this point. Stanley nodded, looking worried. Yeah. We were thinking they got jumped. Either by the gangs or those armored dudes. Shaggy sighed loudly and rubbed a hand through his hair. Arg. Fine. I'll see about that as well. Good work, you two. Keep it up. No problem, boss. This is the type of work I can get behind. Tom chuckled. Shaggy shook his head as he and Franklin turned into the deli's office. A triad of voices overlapped as they entered, all arguing over one another. He blinked as he spotted the three business majors standing in front of the terminal. Each trying to get to the keyboard, but all holding one of the others back. Franklin winced as a blond man grabbed the collar of a dark red alien and pulled. The office had been cleaned out, and the desk had been shoddily repaired. A stack of tablets and papers were arranged on the desk. But before Shaggy could get a look, all three men spotted him. Boss, all of them shouted simultaneously. Shaggy winced and took a step back. What? Tell these two Nimrods to implement my business plan. I insist. No. Your plan is too childish and relies too heavily on the kindness of other businesses. We need to be self-sufficient. We are not getting the zoning permits for a farm in the city, Todd. Give it up. We should focus on the personnel. We need people to get this place up and running. All three men fell back into bickering and Franklin gave Shaggy an apologetic look. They've been at this for a while. They can't agree on a damn thing. So they argue until two of them get tired and the third one wins. Shaggy rolled his eyes. Okay. All three of you, get out. I have shit I need to do. Booed dash. Boss dash. I dash. It wasn't a suggestion. Move. Shaggy growled as all three men tried to argue. With his shout, all three of the business majors went scurrying. Franklin almost followed them before Shaggy grabbed the man's arm. Waiting until they were all out, Shaggy approached the terminal and said, "You're going to be in charge here, Frank. You got to be able to control those three. Sure, we need their expertise, but you're the boss here." Got it. Franklin nodded idly a few times. The tall NPC waggled his head back and forth for a few seconds before he added, "It's Franklin, by the way. Not Frank." Shaggy glanced up from the terminal to see the skinny man looking at him nervously. Shaggy grinned. Noted. Now let me see what those three chuckleheads did. Shaggy spent the next hour or so going over all the paperwork and forms filed by the business trio. For all their petty arguing and whining, the three were actually decent at their jobs. They got all the forms in and expedited within a day. The business was well on its way to opening. They just needed a source of meat and a construction crew. Shaggy could have paid out of pocket to have the system rebuild the shop. But without a construction crew on site, the fees were exorbitant. Still, he paid for the little things. Rebuilding the floor, replacing the windows, and refurnishing the counter. The bigger things were going to have to wait. He checked their current stores of meat to see the two large chimeras sitting in their crates. According to the terminal, though, they couldn't sell the meat. They need a specialty license to sell magical meat. Shaggy groaned and started using the interface to find nearby meat wholesalers. But looking at the messages left in the terminal inbox, the business trio had been trying all day. No one wanted to sell to them. It just wasn't worth it. Fuck. Shaggy groaned. What's up, boss? Meat problems. Shaggy said, wincing at the phrase. Franklin rubbed his hands together before he said, doesn't the den have meat?" Shaggy blinked as he remembered the two minotaurs who were running their bar down in Undertown. He wanted to slap himself. Of course, they were getting meat from somewhere. It probably wasn't legal. Nevertheless, they could talk to them. He really didn't have a head for this stuff at all. Shaking his head, he turned to Franklin and waved the man to the terminal. "Why don't you contact them and see if they can hook us up?" "Me? It's your business, dude. I'm just a silent partner. While you are doing that, I'll go check on what the holdup is with our construction crew." Franklin moved to the terminal hesitatingly. Once he was at the holographic keyboard, he glanced up at Shaggy. "Thanks, boss. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." "Good luck, Mr. Shaggy paused as he never got Franklin's last name. "Stein, boss. Franklin Stein."